All right, thank you. So welcome everyone. The town of Hinton respectfully acknowledges that it is located on Treaty 6 territory and Métis Nation Region 4. These are the traditional territories and ancestral lands of Indigenous peoples, including the Plains Cree First Nations, Assiniboine Winawak Rocky Mountain First Nations, Stoney, Tsuut'ina, Nakota, Decenniline, Saulteaux, Mountain Métis, Méchief, non-status peoples, and many other communities that continue to enrich the land on which the town of Hinton was established. So with this sentiment, the inaugural meeting of the 2021-2025 Hinton Town Council is called to order at 4:02. So as the interim CAO, I would like to welcome all of you, and particularly a thanks to our elder Rita Carter, Primrose Thompson, and Jennifer Kelly from the Hinton Friendship Center, who have blessed our newly added Treaty 6 flag, our Métis flag, and an eagle feather for today's ceremony as a lasting visual reminder of Council's commitment to today's ceremony and to respect the rich cultural diversity and history of our community. In addition, we want to thank you for purifying this chamber with a traditional smudging ceremony earlier this afternoon in preparation of today's events. And I would also like to welcome RCMP Sergeant Graham Gursky, who will be escorting mayor and councillors-elect to perform their oaths of office here today. Also a thank you to MP Soroka and our MLA Long, who are unable to be here this evening, but send their well wishes to the incoming council. And finally, I'd like to acknowledge the families of incoming council members as they are joining us here today. Thank you for showing your support. Feel free to take photos throughout the ceremony, but we ask that you do so from your seats, and the town's communication department will be taking photos which will be available after today's ceremony. So with that part done, without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce Attorney of Law Timothy McClelland. We're happy to have him here to swear in the mayor-elect. Mr. McClelland, I invite you to the podium to preside over the administration of the oath of office for the mayor-elect Marcel Michaels.
Thank you very much. I just want to say, first of all, it's an honor to be asked to do this. I have been looking forward to this all day since I found out. So we'll now begin the administration of the oath of office for the town of Hinton mayor-elect 2021 to 2025 term. At this time, I'd like to call forward Mayor-elect Marcel Michaels to take the oath of office. So, Mr. Michaels, I'll ask you to please read out the oath of office that's in front.
Thank you, Mr. McClelland. I, Marcel Michaels, swear that I will diligently, faithfully, and to the best of my ability execute accordingly to the law of office of mayor for the town of Hinton, so help me God.
And I'll have you sign the oath. Distinguished guests, your 2021 to 2025 Mayor, Mayor Michaels. Almost started doing. At this time, I'll turn over the chairing duties to Mayor Michaels for the remainder of the.
Thank you, Mr. McClelland. I now have the privilege to swear in each councillor-elect. I will call each councillor forward one at a time in alphabetical order to take the oath of office. I now call upon Councillor Hawes to take their oath of office.
I, Trevor Hawes, solemnly affirm that I will diligently, faithfully, and to the best of my ability execute according to the law the office of counselor for the town of Hinton.
Everyone, your 2021 to 2025 counselor, Counselor Hawes. I now call upon Counselor LaBerge to take their oath of office. After you.
I, Brian LaBerge, solemnly affirm that I will diligently, faithfully, and in the best of my ability, execute, according to the law, the office of counselor for the town of Hinton.
If you could please sign your oath of office. Your 2021 to 2025 counselor, Counselor LaBerge. I now call upon Counselor Magoon to take their oath of office. After you.
I, Ryan Magoon, swear that I will diligently, faithfully, and to the best of my ability, execute according to law the office of counselor for the town of Hinton. So help me God.
If you can please sign your oath of office. Your 2021 to 2025 counselor, Counselor Magoon. I call upon Counselor Ostashik to take their oath of office. After you.
I, Albert Ostashik, swear that I will diligently, faithfully, and to the best of my ability execute according to the law the office of counselor for the town of Hinton. So help me God.
Could you please sign your oath of office? Your 2021 to 2025 counselor, Counselor Ostashik. I now call upon Counselor Race to take their oath of office. After you.
I, Joanne Race, swear that I will diligently, faithfully, and to the best of my ability execute according to the law of the office of Councillor for the town of Hinton. So help me God.
You can now sign your oath of office. Your 2021 to 2025 counselor, Counselor Race. I now call upon Counselor Taylor to take their oath of office. After you.
I, Stuart Taylor, swear I will diligently, faithfully, and to the best of my ability execute according to the law the office of Councillor for the town of Hinton. So help me God.
You can now sign your oath of office. Your 2021 to 2025 counselor, Counselor Taylor. It is with my utmost honor that I present to you today the Town of Hinton 2021 to 2025 term Town Council. Council, you may now be seated. I ask council to move the following resolution: that Hinton Town Council acknowledge and agree to the terms of the Town of Hinton Code of Conduct as presented. Ms. Wade will be handing you a copy to sign.
We can share.
'26 today, right?
As this concludes our swearing in ceremony for the 2021 to 2025 term Town Council of Hinton, I would like to take the time to express our endless thanks to our distinguished guests for the earlier ceremony. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to be here and be part of this ceremony. And with that, I will ask for our first motion to adjourn. Councilor Ostashik.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. I move that council adjourn an inauguration meeting.
Thank you, Councilor Ostashik. Council, we have a motion on the floor. All those in favor? Thank you much. Thank you very much, everyone.
There we go.
Oh, yeah. There you go.
Yeah, sounds good. Oh, we're gonna draw first the right at the beginning of that? Yeah, let's close the order. Okay, sounds like additional territories and ancestral lands of indigenous people, including the Plain Cree First Nations, Assiniboine, Winnewag, Rocky Mountain First Nations, Stoney, Tsuut'ina, Nakota, Dene Sulin, Salto, Mountain Métis, Michi, and many other communities that continue to enrich the land on which the town of Hinton was established. And with that, I'll call this meeting to order at 4:30. Council, any additions or deletions to today's agenda? Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, as we didn't do the review of the code of conduct in the last session, could we add that to the agenda, please?
Action item number 6, review of the code of conduct.
Yeah.
Okay, we have one amendment. Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to make the amendment that we move into closed session after action item 3, prior to citizen at large board and committee appointments.
Thank you, Council. Council, any further additions or deletions? Administration?
None from administration. Thank you.
Council, we have 2 amendments. I would accept the motion. Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to move that we adopt the organizational meeting of council agenda as amended for October 26th, 2021.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Council, we have a motion on the floor. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? That is passed unanimously. That'll bring us to our seating of council chambers, which will be done by random draw. If I can ask council to stand to my left as we do the selection of our seating. Yeah.
Sorry, older, a little slower.
The seating for this portion will be from my right to left. Seat 1 would be to my right, followed by seat 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. Once I read the first name for seat 1, you can make your way there. Seat 1 will be Councillor Taylor. Seat 2, Councillor Race. Seat 3, Councillor LeBerge. Seat 5, Councillor Hawes. Seat 6, Councillor Magoon. And seat 7, Councillor Stachek. Thank you, everyone. CAO Howard, anything further for action item number 1?
No, we'll just have Ms. Randall put that up on the screen for you. Endorse that. Thank you.
Council, I will entertain a motion. Councillor Hawes.
I'd like to move the council approve the seating in council chambers as per random ballot outlined in the council procedure bylaw number 1153, assigning Councillor Taylor to seat 1, Councillor Race to seat 2, Councillor LeBarge to seat 3, Mayor Michaels to seat 4, Councillor Hawes to seat 5, Councillor Magoon to seat 6, and Councillor Stachek to seat 7.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. Council, we have a motion on the floor. Any debate or questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? That is passed unanimously. Anything further for this item this evening? Seeing none, that'll bring us to our second item, Deputy Mayor roster, CAO Howard.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels, through to council. So in accordance with the council procedure bylaw 1153, during this organizational meeting, the deputy mayor roster shall be determined by appointing each councillor for a 3-month term. The roster shall be determined primarily by the number of years served as a member of council, and secondarily by the number of votes the council received at the most recent general municipal election. The recommendation of administration is that the roster on a rotational basis, 3 months, starting with Councillor Magoon, Councillor Ostashik, Councillor Hawes, Councillor Race, Councillor Labarge, and Councillor Taylor. And that'll rotate on a continuous basis until the 2025 municipal election. Thank you.
Thank you, CAO Howard. Council, any questions or direction? Councilor Bear.
I guess I do have a question. I mean, Councillor Taylor does have 4 years of council experience as well, so I don't know what that matters, but.
CAO Howard.
Maybe invite Ms. Randall to reply to that.
Thank you. Here, we just calculated off this recent election and who was just recently on council.
Sure. Thank you, administration. Council, any further questions or direction? Councilor Hawes.
I'd like to move, if we could bring it up on the screen. Thank you, Ms. Rendell. I'd like to move that council approve the deputy mayor roster with a 3-month rotational basis, starting with Councillor Magoon from October 26, 2021 to January 31st, 2022. Councillor Stashik from February 1st, 2022 to April 30th, 2022. Councillor Hawes from May 1st, 2022 to July 31st, 2022. Councillor Race from August 1st, 2022 to October 31st, 2022. Councillor Laberge from November 1st, 2022 to January 31st, 2023, and Councillor Taylor from May 1st, 2023 to July 31st, 2023, continuing the rotational basis until the 2025 municipal election. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Hawes. Council, we have a motion on the floor. Any debate or questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? That's passed unanimously. Council, anything further for the second item this evening? Seeing none, thank you, administration. That'll bring us to our third action item, 2021 to 2022 council meeting schedule, CAO Howard.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels, through to council. Again, section 5 of the council procedure bylaw 1153 sets out the frequency of regular council meetings and committee of the whole meetings for council. It reflects the recent approved bylaw, where the monthly meeting frequency was increased from 3 to 4 meetings a month. We have provided 3 calendar schedule options for council's consideration. Those options are being provided as council has made a practice in recent years of adopting a meeting schedule that provided for fewer meetings during the summer months. And this report provides you with the opportunity for the incoming council to discuss this practice. I also have Ms. Way as the author of this report to support any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, CAO Howard. Council, Councilor Taylor.
I couldn't quite understand the extra cost of the per meeting for the summer. Was that about $10,000? And if we don't have enough agenda topics and we cancel the meeting, then we save that cost?
Administration.
Ms. Way.
Apologies, council. I can't hear Councillor Taylor. I have Carlos working on adjusting the volume, but perhaps if you just lean in a bit for the purpose of this question.
Councilor Taylor.
Should I go ahead? Can you hear that?
That's perfect. Go ahead.
is the cost per meeting in the summer for the extra meetings about $10,000 a meeting? Is that roughly what it is? I couldn't quite understand it from the report. And if we miss a meeting or we don't have a meeting because we don't have enough agenda topics, then we save that cost. Is that correct?
That's correct. So if there are fewer meetings, there will be savings. The total calculation for 2022 is based on the remuneration, or pardon me, the meeting fees that you each receive, calculated on the number of meetings throughout the entire year. Additional to that, we are looking at increasing the 2022 budget as council has gone over that budget, dating back to 2016 with the exception of 1 year. So that is the reason that we do see that calculation increasing in 2022, especially with those additional meetings.
Yeah, so the question was, what's the cost of a meeting?
I believe it's in the report, but if you give me, it depends on the length of the meeting. I believe I calculated it on a 3-hour meeting, which I believe is 125 off the top of my head. I think if you give me 1 second, I can pull the report. I believe the calculation is there. Yeah, so below in the financial implications section, it's a green chart. It is highlighted that for 2022, it was based on the amount of 125 times the 7 counselors times the 12 months, including that extra meeting.
So that's 10,000 extra to have an extra meeting a month for the whole year?
For 1 extra meeting per month. So that's an additional 12 meetings.
Okay.
Yeah.
If I may, that's to reflect the 3 meetings a month that we had previously. And for the summer, if it's the will of council, it's an additional 4 meetings. So the math for the 4 additional meetings based on 125, albeit hard to predict, would be 125 times 7 times 4. Or that would be the cost if we would do meetings all summer above and beyond what we had previously. If that brings any clarity. This way, is that accurate?
Yes, that's correct, Mayor Michaels.
Thank you. Councilor LeBerge.
I'll lean in so you can hear me. So I have a follow-on question to that, actually. In the implications for the decision section, it says that the approved 2021 budget reflected the same dollars as 2020. That accounted for 4 meetings per month. So if we approve that, there's actually not an increase, correct?
Administration.
So that's, thank you, Mayor Michaels, through to Councilor LeBerge. There is an increase, and I believe it's spoken to kind of through that implications of decision section, for the reason that I want to count all of the meetings we're attending, but also recognize, as I spoke to before on Councilor Taylor's points, that additional meetings have been ongoing above and beyond this schedule, which has caused council to exceed their meetings budget in years previous. So going into 2022, I'm doing a look at that budget with our corporate services director and making sure that we're accounting for additional meetings, as we have seen through a trend over the past couple of years. But the amount of 110 is for those extra 1 meetings a month over the course of 12 months.
Councilor LeBerge.
Sure. Yeah, I'm fine.
CEO Howard.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. So essentially, the increase that's required to the 2022 budget is not solely based on the additional meetings you may have. It's based on the trend that has been set in the last several years that consistently demonstrates that there's more money needed in your budget for the number of meetings that are hosted. So I recognize that over the years, there have been many efforts by councils and council members to be cognizant of that. And yet at the end of the year, we are still significantly over budget for this code. And so due diligence in the budgeting is past precedent and likely the new is that there are going to be additional meetings which counts for your special meetings, all of those sorts of things that are really quite impossible to budget for, other than to take a look at the trend and anticipate that at the very least, should budget at least that much more. So it's not solely the extra meeting that's being added perhaps each month. It's also reflects what's needed from your trend. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO Howard. Council? We have three different variations in front of us. Councilor Magoon?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move that council approve the 2021-2022 council meeting schedule option 1, which aligns with council procedural bylaw number 1153 and provides regular meetings on the first and third Tuesdays of the month and committee of the whole meetings on the second and fourth Tuesdays of the month, and for no breaks during the summer months. Thank you.
Councilor Magoon. Council, we have a motion on the floor for option 1. Any debate, questions? Councilor Ostashik?
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. I'll be speaking in favor of the option that's presented. I feel one of the challenges that's presented council over the last term and prior to that is the fact that there was only a few meetings held throughout the summer. Business doesn't stop throughout the summer. I think it's important that council still has the opportunity to meet, to be able to drive business forward, and to be able to make sure that that the town's able to move in a timely fashion and not have to experience delays waiting for the next meeting. So, as I said, I am in favor of the proposed motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Ostashik. Council? CEO Howard?
Just a point of clarification, if I may. I just wanted to be sure that council was working off the same option 1. We did provide an amended agenda, page 33 of your package. So before this one to vote, we're looking at the one that is demonstrates November to November of this year to October 22 of the next year. Is that correct? Everyone's, I just wanted to make sure you're all voting on the correct one. Thank you.
Council? Councilor Hawes?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's a couple of reasons actually I'm speaking in favor of this schedule as well. The other, I do believe that throughout the summer, and I mean, Councilor Taylor brought up that the fact that if the agenda is light, maybe for some reason we don't have quorum, then there is that option to cancel meetings if need be. But I agree that business doesn't end over the summer. The other reason I also appreciate this is typically during FCM, we also took a couple of weeks off, and I noted that this version, there is no time off for meetings at FCM, and I appreciate that because I think that's another couple of meetings a year that we missed out on. So I thank you, administration, for also keeping those meetings present during FCM. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Hawes. Councilor Taylor and CEO Howard, is everything in order?
My apologies. If I could just take a moment here with Councillor Taylor, I will just highlight I have given him my version of option 1, and I'm just going to highlight the couple items. Automatic. So it's going from November to October instead of October to September. There were a couple of your budget dates, including the 21st of November and 2 committees of the whole on January 14th and 15th. And then because you now have October, this schedule should take you right through until your next organizational meeting. You now have October 2022 in there, and it has your organizational meeting on October 18th.
Thank you, CEO Howard. Councilor Taylor?
Yeah, no, I'm okay. The words up there, I'm completely good with for reasons that have already been said.
Thank you, Councilor Taylor. I support this in principle. My only concern for council is this is a very big change to what we previously had. Is there an appetite to remove the December 28th meeting and have 1 week where staff doesn't have to be here also throughout the year? If we're going to go all summer and throughout AUMAs and FCMs and things of that nature, I believe the 28th of December, I would prefer removing, and knowing that administration has planned their vacations, et cetera, with it. That would be my only concession that I would ask. Councilor Magoon?
Yeah, if that was made as a friendly amendment, I'd support that.
Thank you, Councilor Magoon. Council? Would anyone like to make that amendment? Counselor Taylor.
I move that we amend the schedule to remove the meeting on the week of December 28th.
Perfect. And could that be done as a friendly amendment, then, Ms. Rendell? Thank you. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Councilman McEwen and Councilor Taylor. I believe this will provide that 1 week rest, I think, between our holiday season. And with that, I support this with the day and age of Zoom. I think it gives us the opportunity to meet during the summer quickly if need be, and we always have the luxury of removing them as it was stated before. So I'll be in favor of this. Council, any further debate or questions? Councilor Haas.
Just one more comment, actually, to be in favor of this, but it was pointed out that we also had extra meetings going over our budget. This potentially would possibly avoid some of those extra meetings also being called. So I think this is, a win-win for everybody. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Haas. Council, anything further? Seeing none, I'll call the question that council approves the 2021 to 2022 council meeting schedule option 1, which aligns with the council procedural bylaw 1153 and provides regular meetings on the first and third Tuesdays of the month, and committee of the whole meetings on the second and fourth Tuesdays of the month, and for no breaks during the summer months, with the removal of the December 28th, 2021 committee of the whole meeting. Council, all those in favor? That's passed unanimously. Council, anything further for this item? Councilor LeBaire.
I would just like to apologize to everybody for that ringing phone. My phone is on silent, but apparently it rings through my new tablet, so sorry about that.
Thank you for that. Council, anything further for this item? Seeing none, that'll bring us to Councilor Haas.
I'd like to move that we move in closed session now.
Thank you, Councilor Haas. Council, we have a motion to go in closed session. All those in favor? That is passed unanimously, and we will reconvene. Hello, everyone. I'd like to reconvene this meeting at 5:08, and we will continue to action item number 4 after being in closed session for it. CAO Howard.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels, through to council. In accordance with your bylaw 1153, council must hold an organizational meeting annually, and during that meeting, council appoints the public members to the boards and committees. This year, the following boards and committees are requiring public membership appointment: the Community Engagement and Advisory Committee, that's CEAC, the Hinton Grant Funding Advisory Committee, the Hinton Library Board, the Hinton Youth Advisory Council, the Assessment Review Board, Subdivision and Development Appeal Board, and finally, the Beaver Boardwalk Community Oversight Committee. Council has reviewed the applications in closed session, and unless you have any other questions at this time, Ms. Wade has provided you with your ballots, and we'll give you a couple minutes to fill those out.
Thank you, CO Howard. Council, any questions before we go on to voting? Councilor Haas.
Just a quick clarification for the SEAC committee. We currently have one applicant, but the other 5 positions, they're in their second term of it, correct?
Administration.
Sorry, I'll need a minute to take a look at that unless Ms. Wade or Ms. Way, either of them can answer that quicker than I can flip through my pages here. The question, I believe, from Councillor Hawes is we are seeking 6 public members for a 2-year term. We only have one applicant. Go ahead, Ms. Way.
Thank you, CO Howard, through to Councillor Haas. In the past couple of years, this board has had longstanding members. While the bylaw does provide for their terms, they oftentimes we're struggling to fill those positions. So we have a number of folks who've been around for a number of terms. And everyone that is currently there does intend to stay, and we do have remaining positions open that were not filled from last year.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Haas. Thanks, administration. Councilor Taylor.
Um, we have resumes for some of the youth members. We don't vote for the youth members?
Administration?
Yes, sorry if I skipped over that. I
Do I-
did
do I-
mention the Hinton Youth Advisory Committee. We're seeking 8 students for a 1-year term. Oh, sorry, you don't have a ballot for them.
I don't.
Is that, okay, my apologies. We may need a couple minutes for administration to just print those off. My apologies.
Mayor Michaels?
Councillor Stashik?
Thank you. If I may, I noted I have 2 ballots for Subdivision and Development Appeal Board. So I'm not sure if maybe one, I'm not sure. Anyway, I have 2 of those.
Does everyone have 2 of those?
Yes.
So while Miss Wade just ran down the hallway to do other ones, we could,
It's just a duplicate.
right, but we could modify that one. No, but we need more youth advisory votes than that. My apologies. A couple options. You can either take a short recess or we can table this item and move on to your next.
Councillor Magoon?
We could take a 10-minute break to give administration time to print those out. Mr. Mayor, do you want to make a motion?
I'll just move to have a 7-minute recess and we'll reconvene at 5:20.
Yeah.
Oh,
I don't
look
remember.
at you, Chair.
Of course. You now also have the ballot in front of you for the Hinton Youth Advisory Council. Correct, okay. And then the third piece, if I can invite Miss Way, thank you, to just speak to the little bit of confusion perhaps around the nomination of a representative from the museum. Miss Way?
Thank you, CEO Howard, through to the remainder of council. So this position has previously been held by the employee of the museum, Madison Sharman. I received communication from the museum that their representative will be changing for the HIAC committee. And as per section 3.1.1 of bylaw 1128, which sets out the Hinton Youth Advisory Council bylaw, the Northern Rockies Museum of Culture and Heritage representative is appointed similarly to an admin member or how council is appointed. So the museum puts forward their recommendation, which in this case is Ms. McKay, and then council simply affirms that. And this is further reflected in section 4, the application process for the Youth Advisory Council, wherein only youth actually go through the application process. Thank you.
Thank you, administration. My question, I guess, to CEO Howard, for the last part, a motion of council will be needed in order to appoint Ms. McKay. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay, perfect. And just to confirm for those who are watching, we have a duplicate is the Subdivision Development Appeal Board. Only one will be on. We have our new sheet for the Youth Council, and we will deal with the museum section also. Any further questions before we go to voting, council? Seeing none, we'll take a moment to vote and you can hand in your ballots. And we'll take one moment to tabulate the votes and
Is the video on?
Pardon me? Does your computer do this?
Administration?
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. Have tallied the ballot. We've also identified an error, an inconsistency on the, sorry, is it the some of you had two different names to vote for. So we will redo that vote, but in the meantime, we'll move forward with the rest of them and get you new ballots to vote again on the SEAC appointment. The rest of them are tallied, and you have those, Ms. Rendell? Okay. Just remove the SEAC one for now, and you can address your other ones.
So council, we have some of the results there. Any questions or directions? Administration, would you like these done in conjunction or separate?
Whatever you guys prefer. I have one motion for them all.
Councillor Stashik.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. If I could request that they be split in the event that there's a particular one that a councillor would like to speak to. Okay, thank you.
Council, I'll entertain a motion. Councillor Hawes.
I'd like to move that council appoint Jessica Hersey, Hinton Grant Funding Advisory Committee for a one-year term to the 2023 organizational meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. Council, we have a motion on the floor. Any questions, debate? Seeing none, I'll call to question. All those in favor? That's passed unanimously. Council, Councillor Race.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to move that council appoint Sue Armstrong, Jace Russ, Mike Story, and Kylie Nine to the Hinton Municipal Library Board for a 3-year term to the 2024 organizational meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Council, we have a motion on the floor. Any debate or questions? Seeing none, I'll call to question. All those in favor? It's passed unanimously. Council, Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move the council appoint Nigel Knight to the Assessment Review Board for a 5-year term to the 2026 organizational meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Council, we have a motion on the floor. Any debate or questions? Councillor Laberge.
Well, I noticed in Nigel's application, he's done this for 20 years and he's leaving. And if you know anybody who might be interested in doing this, it would be hell to watch 20 years of experience walk out the door and not to have somebody sitting with Nigel here this next 2 years to bring some of that home. That'd be a real shame.
Thank you, Councillor Laberge.
And to thank Nigel for 20 years of service on that board.
Thank you, Councillor Laberge. On that point, I guess, CEO Howard, any comments on how the town could better prepare themselves to transition this handoff of this position? Because I would assume we just follow the same process for the other ones of just waiting until that person resigns. But as Councillor Laberge brought up, it's a 20-year investment into one person. It's going to be a daunting task for the next person.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels, through to council. We could refer to the bylaw to see if there's any process or protocol in there that gives us direction on how to deal with something specific like this. Off the side of that, it makes sense to, sort of have that succession planning that, whether it's mentorship, it's just even to, the sort of the offboarding and process. So we can flag that and leave it with administration. There may be an opportunity either through an ongoing call for citizens to appointments to these boards that we could maybe create something for that or look for an interest for that as sort of an informal position. Or we may have to come back to council to amend that to allow specifically for that case. But we do definitely see the merit in that. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO Howard. With that, council, we have a motion on the floor. Any further debate or questions? Seeing none, I'll call to question the council appoint Nigel Knight to the Assessment Review Board for a 5-year term to the 2026 organizational meeting. Council, all those in favor? That's passed unanimously. Council? Councillor Race?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move that council appoint Susan Armstrong to the Subdivision and Development Appeal Board for a 5-year term to the 2026 organizational meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Council, we have a motion on the floor. Any debate or questions? Seeing none, I'll call to question. All those in favor? It's passed unanimously. Council, if we can just scroll up, Ms. Oh, perfect. Councillor Hawes.
I'd like to move that council appoint student representatives Jada Orr, Cadence Rogani, John Torres, Sterling Moselle, Leah Cornier and Hayden Emberndrum, and Lorraine McKay as the Northern Rockies Museum of Culture and Heritage representative to the Hinton Youth Advisory Council for 1-year term to the 2022 organizational meeting. And I apologize for the pronunciations of some of those names.
They were tough.
Yeah, they were tough. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. Council, we have a motion on the floor. Any debate or questions? Seeing none, I'll call to question. All those in favor? That's passed unanimously. Council.
Michael?
Administration.
Yes, thank you. Before you consider this last recommended motion, I'd like to invite Ms. Wade to come up and provide you with your ballots for a revote on that last category. You've
Thank you.
a couple seconds to do that, and then the tally will be much quicker than the last one.
Thank you.
And we'll keep this moving. Again, my apologies. Thank you.
It is complete. Okay, Council, we have another option on the board. Any direction? Councillor Hawes.
I'd like the council appoint Benita Smith to the Community Engagement and Advisory Committee for a 2-year term to the 2023 organizational meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. Council, we have a direction on the floor. Seeing no one, I'll call to question. All those in favor? That's passed unanimously. Council, we have potentially one more. Any questions or direction? Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. I'd like to move that council direct administration to continue to advertise for the remaining open positions on boards and committees and to bring the applications back to council for decision at a future council meeting prior to January 30th, 2021.
Thank you, Councillor.
Oh, yes, that should be 2022. Good catch. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik and administration. Council, we have a direction on the floor. Councillor Hawes.
Thank you. Just the question to administration. I assume the same advertising ways we advertised before, which will be through Facebook, internet. Those will be the happening in the coming days, I'm assuming.
Administration.
I may refer to Ms. Wei.
Thank you, CAO Howard, through to the remainder of council and Councillor Hawes. That's correct. It'll be through the Hinton Voice, our Facebook networking. It will also appear in radio ads, which is something that we have increased to kind of spread that awareness. Thank you.
Thank you, administration. Councillor Hawes.
Oh, that's fine. Thank you.
Council, anything further before I call this to question? Seeing none. Call to question that council direct administration to continue to advertise for remaining open positions on board and committees and to bring the applications back to council for decision at a future council meeting prior to January 30th, 2022. Council, all those in favor? Passed unanimously. Council, anything further for this item this evening? Seeing none, thank you, Administration, Council, and those watching for the delay, and thank you for the counting, Ms. Wade. That'll bring us to our fifth action item for this evening, council member appointments to board and committees. CAO Howard.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels, through to council. So this is the last item related to your council procedure bylaw this evening and your organizational topics. Your bylaw, of course, requires that at your annual organizational meeting that council can review and formalize the mayor's recommendation of the appointment of councillors to committees of council. In advance of this meeting, the mayor provided a list of his recommendations for inclusion in this report, which is attachment 1. And if I can refer to page 45 in your package, please, there was an error on our part to include the appointment of a councillor and an alternate to the Hinton Golfing Society. We do not have that appointment in our purview at this time. And so we are recommending that that be removed. So the remaining appointments for consideration this evening are the Beaver Boardwalk Community Oversight Committee, Performance Review Recruitment Committee, Community Engagement and Advisory Committee, Community Futures West Yellowhead, Emergency Services Committee, Evergreen Foundation Board, Forestry Resource Advisory Group, Hinton Municipal Library Board, the Hinton Police Town Liaison Committee, the Hinton Economic Regional Development Coalition, Hinton Youth Advisory Council, Home for Fine Arts Society of Hinton, which is of course our ASH group down at the Guild, the West Fraser Pulp Mill Advisory Committee, and finally the West Yellowhead Regional Waste Management Authority. And the additional note on that one at the request of the authority is, as you know, that group is considering moving from an authority to a commission. And if that should happen during the time of the appointment of the member on this, on the authority, is that of course, person would remain as also the representative on the commission board. And I think that's it, unless you have any further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, CAO Howard. Councilor Magoon.
Yeah, just a point of information. It's a relatively minor one, but it's important to the motions that are made. The spelling on my name is incorrect, and seeing as it's going to be actionable items, if that could be corrected in the future motions that we're anticipating being made tonight, that would be appreciated.
Thank you, Councilor Magoon. Councilor Hawes.
Yeah, I apologize, I didn't send this ahead of time. This question is to administration. It's in regards to the, sorry, I've got to make sure I get Emergency Services Committee. I understood that, I thought that had changed, that's all of council now in the last year or so, that, and I can't recall exactly why it changed, but I was a member of that previously, and it switched over to all of council and not just 3 councilors and an alternate. So I don't know if administration could speak to that.
Administration.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. Through to Councillor Hawes. If I could invite Ms. Way as the author of this report. I'm not sure if you have the terms of reference handy for that committee. My apology, I don't know that off the top of my head. If you like, we can hold that until later in the meeting if you want to move through the rest of your motions. Or Ms. Way, if you have that now, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Do you have it open, CO Howard? If they want to proceed with the other ones, I'll get that answer from the bylaw 1144.
Thank you.
Thank you, CAO Howard. Councilor Taylor.
Is this an appropriate time to discuss the number of councillors on some of these committees?
CAO Howard.
I believe your bylaw which prescribes what the appointments are. You can certainly direct administration to bring back a report to amend that bylaw, but the appointments outline here comply with the bylaw the way it sits today.
Councilor Taylor.
I'll take that as a no.
Well, and if I may, we have an opportunity to change it. One example is the policing committee is the mayor and a councillor. Those are things that could be amended to be 2 councillors, right? So if there's anything of appetite that you would like to see change, I would give that direction to from council in order to review this, whether as a discussion item or to bring back the terms of reference to a future committee of the whole meeting for us to then have that conversation to bring forward a amended draft.
Well, okay,
Yeah.
so can I mention my comment?
Absolutely.
It's the Beaver Boardwalk Community Oversight Committee. And I was just thinking that if it's an oversight committee rather than a public engagement committee, having 3 counselors on it seems counselor heavy to me. It almost seems like you're trying to swamp the committee with counselors, and that's it's not really good for a oversight committee. It would be better to have less counselors and they have more control over what they're doing rather than us have that much participation on the committee. That would be the one that I would make a comment on.
Thank you for flagging that, Councillor Taylor. I'm going to go to CEO Howard, as the terms of reference have recently changed from the prior committee having 3 members and an alternate. If I could go to administration and look at the current, I had seen that also. To my knowledge, it's 1 councillor that is appointed to that committee and 1 alternate. And hence the recommendations that I put forward were for just 1 councillor and an alternate. So,
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Michaels. The Councillor Taylor, I see Miss Way with her hand up. She has been working closely with that group, and it may just be the content in the description box that's incorrect. She's nodding that is correct. So I can confirm that what you just said is correct.
so Councillor Taylor,
One person from council.
correct.
Not 1 mayor, 1 councillor,
No.
but 1 person from council.
Correct.
Well, that's very appropriate. Thank you.
Perfect. No, thanks for flagging that. Councillor Magoon.
Yeah, I'm, Mr. Mayor, just speaking to the recommendation, I know there's other considerations. That being said, I would like to point out that there was a request made officially in writing from the Hinton Golfing Committee to have representatives from council in a non-voting capacity attend those meetings. I understand why it might not be prudent to make the decision today. However, I would like that brought back. I think it would be a good idea to bring that back to a committee of the whole meeting for further discussion.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Administration, if there was a will of council in order to entertain that with the other moving parts tied to obviously us owning that golf course now, but we would want a non-voting member, how best should council bring that forward?
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. I would recommend that council direct administration to bring an analysis report of appointing a non-voting council representative on the Hinton Golfing Society board to a meeting of the whole. It can come directly to a regular if you like, but probably a better discussion to come to the meeting of the whole. And if there's a particular timeline you would like on that, I consider what the timeline is to turn that around. We do definitely recommend that approach. There is information that council will need before they can deliberate and make a decision on that matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Howard. Councillor Magoon, did you want to make that direction? Councillor Magoon?
You mean the one just so aptly put by our interim
Correct.
CAO? Yes, I would like to make that one. I think that was duly put, and I will wholeheartedly support that on the advice of an. That allows me to delete the hatchet job I was doing down here.
But, no.
Michael's through to Councillor Magoon. We'll just put that draft motion up on the screen for you and confirm or modify it as your own.
Councilor Magoon, are you okay with that?
Absolutely, and I thank administration for working with us on that.
Thank you. Council, we have a motion on the floor. Councilor Taylor?
Councillor McGowan, can you explain the non-voting versus voting council representative, why it would be non-voting versus voting?
Councilor Magoon?
Considering that we've got money in this venture, why wouldn't we get a vote?
Yeah, simply because there's considerations with land, there's considerations with labor. Obviously, we can't delve into either of those areas in public because, again, some of those may be concerns that should be brought in camera because the nature of labor, the nature of land, and also past practice on that board, non-voting versus voting. So those are all things that council members who aren't up to date on what past practices have been can be updated on what the past practice has been and also what our options are moving forward.
Yeah, and we can discuss that when we discuss that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, that's
Absolutely.
perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councilor Taylor. Councilor Magoon, Council, anything further before I call this to question? Seeing none. Call to question the council direct administration to bring an analysis report of appointing a non-voting council representative on the Hinton Golf Society board to a future committee of the whole meeting. Council, all those in favor? That's passed unanimously. Councilor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So would we take care of this right now, the council representation, and then make our own motions on committees that we would like to see? So we take care of this first and then make our
That
motions?
would be up to the will of council. I mean, technically, you'd be able to do that direction now. We can go through the approved one. That would be my recommendation. And then once we're done, the list of all the approved ones, then we can have a discussion pertaining on any future direction of other committees we'd like to entertain.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Race. CEO Howard.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. I have a response to the Emergency Services Committee. You are correct. That is now all of, every member of council sits on that, so there is no need to appoint anybody to it. It's by default, it's all of you, so you can remove that from your list of motions that are recommended this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO Howard. With that, CEO administration, could I request the recommended options for direction be put on the board for council to move forward?
We'll just start from the top of the list, and if there's something you want to refer to a bit later, but we'll just.
Councilor Stashik.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. Seeing as though there's been some changes to at least a couple of the items on the options and alternatives list, I would again ask that the motion be split. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Stashik. Councilor Hawes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to start things off and move that council approves mayor's recommendation for council member appointment to boards and committees as outlined on attachment 1, which provides that Councilor Alberta Stashik be appointed to the Beaver Boardwalk Committee or Community Oversight Committee, and Councilor Taylor be appointed as the alternate.
Thank you, Councilor Hawes. Council, we have a direction on the floor for the EBO committee. Council, any debate, questions?
Just point of clarification, Mr. Mayor. I'm just looking for the purpose of the beginning of that motion that council approved mayor's recommendations up to where it says attachment 1. If we're functionally not approving the entire list at once, is that necessary? Should we simply, would it be more appropriate simply to motion that Councilor Ostashik right through to Councilor Taylor be appointed as the alternate?
Thank you for that, Councilor Magoon. Administration, could we amend that if that's the case?
Yes, absolutely. That's basically an introductory. Had you approved the attachment as presented and everything underneath it, so I support that amendment.
Thank
well.
you for that. Counselor Hawes, are you okay with that?
Yeah, I felt we were actually saying it, so.
Thank
perfect.
you. Okay, council, we have an amended motion on the floor. Any debate, questions, comments? Seeing none, I'll call to question that Counselor Stashik be appointed to the Beaver Boardwalk Community Oversight Committee. Counselor Taylor be appointed as the alternate. Council, all those in favor? That's passed unanimously. Counselor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move that Councilor Ostashik, Mayor Michaels, and Councilor Labarge be appointed to the CAO Performance Review and Recruitment Committee, and Councilor Race be appointed as the alternate.
Thank you, Councilor Magoon. Council, we have a direction on the floor. Any debate or questions? Seeing none, I'll call to question. All those in favor? It's passed unanimously. Councilor Stashik.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. I'd like to move that Councillor Taylor be appointed to the Community Engagement and Advisory Committee, and that Councillor Laberge be appointed as the alternate.
Thank you, Councilor Stashik. Council, any debate or questions? Seeing none, I'll call to question. All those in favor? It's passed unanimously. Councilor Hawes.
I'd like to move that Councillor Stashik and Councillor Labarge be appointed to the Community Futures West Yellowhead, and Mayor Michaels be appointed as the alternate.
Thank you, Councilor Hawes. Council, any debate or questions? Seeing none, I'll call to question. All those in favor? It's passed unanimously. Council. Councilor Hawes.
I'd like to move that Mayor Michaels, oh, sorry, that's the wrong one. I did. Yeah. All right. I'd like to move that Mayor Michaels be appointed to the Evergreens Foundation Board and that Councilor Race be appointed as the alternate.
Thank you, Councilor Hawes. Council, any questions or debate? Seeing none, I'll call to question. All those in favor? It's passed unanimously. Councilor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a question. Some of these committees, there's a lot of information that is brought up at these committees, and if you come in as an alternate, you're not up to speed on everything. So can an alternate still attend, kind of as a fly on the wall, not saying anything, but listening to make sure that they have that information should they need to be an alternate at the next meeting?
Administration.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. Through to Councillor Race. A couple thoughts on that. I believe the practice is to make sure that agenda packages, for example, for those committees get sent to everyone, whether you're the alternate or not. So the agenda packages as well as the minutes afterwards. So that should give you a high enough level of understanding of what's going on. The other piece is that when you're in attendance at these meetings, you are compensated for that time. And so I suppose as a volunteer, I'm not sure that unless when you attend, you are always have your council hat on. And so because you have your council hat on in that meeting, you should be compensated as that. I'm not sure that there's the option really to be sort of that fly on the wall, to use your words. We can certainly explore that a little bit further. Again, all of these are not a committee or board that council created. These are other people's boards and committees that you sit on. And so there may be an option in their terms of reference or their bylaws or whatever that give you some sort of latitude to do that. But from the town's perspective, when you attend, you're compensated. Again, you report back to council when you do your round table. So I think it's a relationship you could have if you were the alternate with your main appointed person to debrief or have conversations with. But at this point, I'm not sure how that would be accommodated right now. Thank you.
Councilor Race.
I know that last term with the people committee, there was 4 of us on there. And I could certainly respect why, as an alternate, I would not speak. I would not. And I was there just to get that information. So would it be a decision of council for alternates to attend, with no payment, or?
To my knowledge, at this moment, it's somewhat vague, but it infers, to at least from my opinion, that alternates don't attend. And the reason being is, imagine all the alternates attended all the meetings. And when you take it at that scale, it's, to me, it would be unprofessional, let's say in an intermunicipal meeting, that we're sending all our alternates and other other members, let's say Edson and Jasper sending their own. To me, it becomes challenging in that sense. Now, if there is one-offs, for sure, if let's say there's a big meeting that the primary person will not be able to attend and you have to go prior, those are, I think, use your best discretion in order. In one practice that I think Community Futures has done in the past has invited alternates to their strategic plan. If you go to this strategic plan once a year and you're kind of up to date and then you read the packages, that to me is best practice. But again, that's my interpretation. And I saw Ms. Howard nod that there's nothing that indicates that a counselor is allowed to go, but it also doesn't indicate that they can't go. So that's all I could provide as information.
I'm good, thank you.
Councilor Hawes.
Just the one thing to add, and this is just more for information, and it's probably for, well, all of us, but also for Councilor Labarge and Taylor. Common practice, though, if I recall, being newly appointed as an alternate, that we do go to the first meeting to introduce ourselves, and it is that we record that in our finances, but it's typical that after that, it's only when the primary, but just for purposes for everyone's understanding that, because, you know, then at least you know who's that alternate person. So is that correct, Mayor Michaels?
To my knowledge, administration.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Stashik.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. So in relation to Councillor Race's question about alternates and participation, one thing I would like to address, because I find it very helpful as an alternate, is that meeting minutes go to the alternates. If the alternate's expected to be up to speed and participate in a meeting, if somebody else can't, I find it very helpful that they've got a history of minutes that they can go through to make sure that they're familiar with the matters that are before each of the committees. So simply request, I guess, maybe selfish, maybe not, but I would like to have minutes go to the alternates for all the meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Stashik.
If I could follow up, I don't know if that requires a motion or direct administration, or if that's simply something that just can be done. I'd like some advice on that, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Stashik. Administration, any comments on that?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Michaels, through to Councillor Stashik. With your own boards and committees, we can manage that because we are the administrator for those. Many of the ones that are in front of you on this agenda topic are not, again, ours. So they typically have someone else as the administrator who sets up the meeting, sends out the agendas, sends out the minutes. And so that would definitely be a very reasonable conversation request to have on your first meeting. And I'm sure that they would support that, especially because it indicates your willingness to, lean in, understand, and be able to participate when you can jump in any given moment. So unfortunately, there isn't much that town administration can do to ensure that that happens, other than just encourage you to have that conversation, even as an agenda topic, perhaps at one of your very first meetings when you attend, so that it can get discussed and documented and a commitment can be made one way or the other from any of your boards and committees that you are appointed to. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Howard. Councilor Stashik?
Yep, very good. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Councilor Taylor?
Yeah, I just assume as a courtesy thing, if you're the main person on the committee, that you would make sure that your alternative got a copy, and we wouldn't need to go through a lot of process to make sure that happened.
I think with all the different committees, as CEO Howard alluded to, many of those are not Town of Hinton ones. Just perhaps the primary could have an email sent out to the administrative support for that committee, CCing the individual who's the alternate and asking for the minutes to be sent to both parties when sent after the meeting. So I agree that it would be good practice and it would keep the alternate in the loop. Council, Councilor McGoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move that Councilor Taylor be appointed to the Forest Resource Advisory Group and Councilor Labarge be appointed as alternate.
Thank you, Councilor McGoon. Council, we have a direction on the floor. Any debate, questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? It's passed unanimously. Councilor Stashik.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. I'd like to move that Councillor Hawes and Councillor Magoon be appointed to the Hinton Municipal Library Board and that Councillor Taylor be appointed as alternate.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik. Council, we have a direction on the floor. Any debate or questions? Councillor Hawes?
Just a quick question about. Oh, sorry, just a quick question on this committee, and it's just the logistics of it. So if Councillor Magoon or I cannot attend, does that mean the alternate would also then take one of our places? Because, and I know this is one of the boards that typically, and I had a conversation with Mayor Mike, so is one board member and an alternate, but we've changed it to two. So I just want to clarify that we always have two people there is the intent.
Administration?
Sorry, Mayor Michaels, through to Councillor Hawes, if you can just
Yep, no problem.
reissue that, correct, thank you.
Yeah, I just, because there's two counselors on the library board and an alternate, in past practice, there was one counselor and an alternate, and then, of course, the alternate would go with the primary. But now that there's two with an alternate, so the intent is to have two counselors present. So if one, either Councillor Magoon or I couldn't, then we would contact Councillor Taylor to attend as well. That's going to be the practice now?
Thank you, Mayor Michaels, through to Councillor Hawes. That is correct. When you have two appointed, the expectation is that both attend all of the time, and that hopefully not both of you cannot make it, but at the very least, then there would be an alternate. The other thing I would, if I may take this moment to remind council, is that the mayor does sit ex officio on all boards and committees, so there's always the option to call upon Mayor Michaels to attend in your absence as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Taylor?
Yeah, I was just wondering again that if ever there was a chance to save some money for the taxpayers, that maybe having two members on this committee might be it, because for years we just had one member, and then in the 2013 to 17 council, late in the council, we added on a second member for a particular reason. And I'm not sure that reason still exists to have two members of that committee. So I think we should discuss whether we want two or one. It could save the taxpayer and that counselor, extra counselor, a lot of time and effort in the future.
Thanks, Councillor Taylor. I'll speak to that, seeing that I made the recommendation. It's not a hill that I would particularly die on. It came into the equation of just overall trying to give council the right balance, and it's been a challenge with losing some committees. But I guess that question is open to council. If they prefer exercising the option of one instead of two, that I would support the will of council.
Well, I'm just saying maybe it's worth a 10-minute conversation at a standing committee meeting. So would I put a motion up there to say, can we discuss two versus one members on the library board committee at an upcoming standing committee meeting? Go for two now and discuss it in the near future and go over the reason why the extra person was put on and see if that reason still exists.
Yeah, that's up to the will of council if you want to provide direction, but I would open up for council. We have that opportunity to do so tonight. We could just appoint one. To me, it's not an overly complex conversation. It's just appointing one over two in order to save funds. And if that's the will of council, we do that tonight instead of then dealing with that specifically. If it merits, if there's a will of council to have this at a committee of the whole meeting as its own discussion, absolutely, I would support that too. So it's whatever the direction of council is. Councillor Hawes?
Yeah, my thoughts on that is I wouldn't support a direction of the committee as a whole on this one conversation. I think we can hash that out this evening, but I think if it may help too, there is a couple of committees that I do plan on bringing forward as a discussion item for a committee as a whole, which might help some of the, if they were to come to volition, some of the balance too as well that Mayor Michaels was trying to achieve with these recommendations. So, you know, I don't know if that helps council a little bit in, you know, whether or not this has one or two councillors with an alternate, but those are my thoughts on that matter. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. Council?
Okay, well, my preference is one person on that committee. And that the reason there were two was during that term I talked about, there was two put on for financial reasons at the time. And I don't see the need to have two people on that committee, and I think that one would adequately fill the need with an alternative. So what do I, how do, what?
Motion. Yeah.
I move that we uh, reduce the representation in the library, just change that motion, and then if it passes, it
I'll
passes.
just-
Point
you
point-
could-
point of
Right.
order, Mr. Mayor, there is a motion before
Thanks.
us.
Yeah, there's a
Thank you.
motion. So if you'd like to get assistance from administration in order to amend it, CEO Howard,
Cool.
could you assist?
I'll give that a shot. That was my catch as well, is that you do have a motion on the floor. So Ms. Rendell will chime in on this. I just wanted to make a couple comments as well. We can double check, and I see Ms. Way is still on the screen here, just to double check this bylaw. I believe, if I recall, it used to say, it actually says up to 2 members, not that you have to appoint 2 members. Again, the library board is created by council, and they're the ones that set the by bylaw, and they're the ones who decide the makeup of it. I believe you have that option, Ms. Way, you're nodding that it's up to 2.
That's correct, CEO Howard. It does read in section 2.22 that it's up to 2 counselors. We would have put forward those 2 as that's what's previously been done. It is at the will of council based on that wording. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that affirmation. I, as in my director position, I'm the town liaison who attends those meetings to support the relationship between the library board and the town. I do not believe that there's an interest from the board to have additional, because I know sometimes that is requested. I don't believe that that's been requested at this time. And also a reminder, the uniqueness of council appointed members on the library board is that many of the other committees you are attending as a council rep. Yes, you're doing that with this committee, but you are also a trustee of the board. And so your role on that board is not uniquely and solely as a counselor. There are some there's another hat you wear, similar to a school trustee and those sorts of things that you, in terms of just the role. So I just wanted to bring that up as well. And I think that was all. Okay, so now we also wanted, do we have a motion on the floor, Ms. Rendell, if there was an appetite to either amend this or postpone it and have the protocol here, please?
Because there's a motion on the floor with that one, but the amendment forward.
So if I may, administration, could we split this motion to include just the 1 counselor, or just simply vote on this? And if it's defeated, then Councillor Taylor could make a motion for the 1. So is that an option, to split or to just simply vote? So if there's an appetite to just do 1 counselor, then I would suggest Councillor Taylor makes a motion to split this, to separate Councillor Hawes and Councillor Magoon, and we vote on 1 counselor being appointed. That vote would be only for 1, and then a second one would be done to have the 2nd counselor on. Is my understanding, is that correct, administration?
Yes, that is correct. I would just want to seek clarification on where your alternate would sit. Would that be, you're splitting it 3 ways to 3 motions, or just what would be the preference?
I'm okay if you vote on it just the way it is. If you defeat it, I'm going to put a motion to have 1 counselor on it, and if you pass it, I'm going to assume you have no interest in it. Either way, I'm okay. I just believe that 1 counselor is appropriate for the reasons I said.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Taylor. It sounds like Councillor Taylor will not be splitting, and will just simply support this or not. Councillor Magoon?
Yeah, and certainly I could support 1 counselor instead of 2, but one consideration that strikes me tonight, based on us appointing 4 brand new citizens to that committee this evening, it actually does cause me a little concern. And this might not be the board change to rush into this evening. I think Councillor Taylor had mentioned maybe making the appointment tonight and bringing this back for discussion at another meeting. I think there's certainly some merit to that. And then that way we can also liaise with the library chair and support staff themselves. Again, this is something we could change several weeks from now if we so wanted, by will of council, if we thought that was appropriate at the time. But I think it does bear looking into. but getting some additional advice before we do so.
Thank you, Councilor Magoon. Councilor Race?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you go over again why two were assigned? Why two counselors?
The bylaw allows for up to two, and in balancing the committees of the entire council, I saw an opportunity with meeting fees being lower also to appoint two. But as I said, it's simply a recommendation, and it's something that I would support the will of council.
Thank you.
Council, anything further before I call this to question? Seeing none, call to question that Councillor Hawes and Councillor Magoon be appointed to the Hinton Municipal Library Board and that Councillor Taylor be appointed as alternate. Council, all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried 4-3. Councillor Hawes.
Just on this, now that it's passed, but for some clarification, if in the future it were to be decided, the mayor has an obligation or has the right to also adjust these committees, correct?
To my knowledge, that's not the case. It would have to be a motion of council, but I'll defer to administration.
That is correct. The same type of process that we have tonight would be the case.
So, okay, so if I may follow up with that though, but we have had changes to committees in the past where it was a motion of council that was brought forward by the mayor, stepped out and explained the reason. So if at some point in the future, it was, whether it be that more committees have been established and there needs to be some changes and moves around, there is the opportunity that if this were to also, this could be one of those committees considered to take away possibly in the future. So we're not just for clarification, we're not locked into this per se. With a motion, it can change. So.
Councilor Magoon?
Yeah, and I'd back up this sentiment. This has never been one of those things that stays static, certainly throughout the year, never mind, even longer term. And I think what's also really going to potentially change this is once council has a chance to sit down and do some strategic planning as a group for the first time ever, we may find that there's certain boards and committees that don't yet exist or that perhaps we want to add or subtract that are in more line with the vision that we have as a council. So.
Thank you, Councilor Magoon. Council, any direction or other questions for administration? Councilor Hawes.
I'd like to move on to the next one, and that Mayor Michaels and Councillor Magoon be appointed to the Hinton Police / Town Liaison Committee, and that Councillor Stashik be appointed as the alternate.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. Council, any questions or debate? I'll comment quickly. To me, this is one I brought up as an example prior that I believe two councillors can sit on this one, and currently the bylaw states that it has to be the mayor and a councillor, and I believe this is an opportunity, especially when you want to better balance some of the workload, that this could be one in the future that we could change if there's a will of council to do so. But council, any further debate or questions? Seeing none, I'll call to question that Mayor Michaels and Councillor Magoon be appointed to the Hinton Police Town Liaison Committee and that Councillor Stashik be appointed as alternate. Council, all those in favor? That's carried unanimously. Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move that Councillor LaBerge be appointed to the Hinton Economic Regional Development Coalition and that Councillor Stashik be appointed as alternate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Council, we have a motion on the floor. Councillor LaBerge.
It's actually the Hinton Regional Economic Development Coalition.
Yeah. Thank you for that change. Council, we have a motion on the floor. Any debate or questions? Seeing none, I'll call to question that Councillor LaBerge be appointed to the Hinton Regional Economic Development Coalition and that Councillor Stashik be appointed as an alternate. Council, all those in favor? It's carried unanimously. Council. Councillor Stashik.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. I'd like to move that Councillor Haas and Councillor Race be appointed to the Hinton Youth Advisory Council.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik. Councillor Magoon, just point of information. Yep, there we go. Councillor Haas.
Just a quick question on this one. It seems there is not appointment of an alternate, which I'm assuming is not in the terms of reference, but just for clarification. Because I'm just thinking if for whatever reason Councillor Race or I or not, of course, we would turn to Mayor Michaels as officio. But I'm just curious as there is no alternate on this one where there is on all the other ones.
Thank you for that, Councillor Haas. I had thought that I had submitted, but if I could go to administration, perhaps Ms. Phoebe Campbell, if she remembers who we had assigned as the alternate.
Thank you. I'll just, I'll check your list, the original submission you submitted to me and see if it was maybe missed on there, or if it was missed at all.
So if I will,
Councillor Haas.
I could move to table this until that information so we can continue on and have some clarification on that one.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels, through to Councillor Hawes. The other option is if the mayor recalls that there was one, and if one of you know it was you, we could just skip all of that. And and sorry, Ms. Way has her hand up. It may be a terms of reference issue. Ms. Way?
Thank you, CAO Howard, through to council. I just pulled up the terms of reference here, and there is no mention of an alternate within the terms of reference.
Okay. Ms. Way, you're having volume challenges between your office and here. I'm not sure. You can just repeat that, please. Thank you.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Yes, everybody's nodding. Thank you very much.
So I did pull up the terms of reference, and there is no mention of a alternate in that terms of reference.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is one of my committees, and I know when the other counselor and myself couldn't attend, we would always contact you. So.
Fair enough.
Okay, council, anything further for this? Seeing none, I'll call the question that Councillor Hawes and Councillor Race be appointed to the Hinton Youth Advisory Council. Council, all those in favor? It's passed unanimously. Councillor Hawes.
I'd like to move that Councillor Race be appointed to the Home for Fine.
Apologies. Oh. Thank you. No, it wasn't a fire alarm. It was a...
Okay, sorry.
Carry on. Thanks.
The Councillor Race be appointed to the Home for Fine Arts of Society of Hinton, and that myself, Councillor Hawes, be appointed as the alternate. Maybe it's not appropriate I did that. I'm sorry if I probably shouldn't have. If that's not legislative, that I'm also on mentioned in this motion. No? Okay, thank you.
You could pass it to another council member if you can, please. So you'll need to end that.
I will rescind
Thank
that,
you.
withdraw that then, and turn to another councillor for that. Thank you. Apologize.
Okay, council, since that was not a motion, Councillor LaBerge.
The Councillor Race be appointed for the Home of Fine Arts Society of Hinton, and Councillor Haas be appointed as an alternative.
Thank you, Councillor LaBerge. Council, any debate or questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? It's passed unanimously. Council, Councillor Stashik.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. I'd like to move that Councillor Race be appointed to the West Fraser Pulp Mill Advisory Committee, and Councillor Magoon be appointed as alternate.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik. Council, any debate or questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? It's passed unanimously. Council. Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move that Mayor Michaels and Councillor Hawes be appointed to the West Yellowhead Regional Waste Management Authority, and Councillor Taylor be appointed as alternate, and that all appointees shall remain the appointed members if the Yellowhead Regional Waste Commission Board is established during their term of appointment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Council, we have a motion on the floor. Councillor Hawes.
Just a quick question on the last part of that motion, that all appointees shall remain. That's if though the terms of reference to that commission, how that's going to be laid out, because it may not be 2 members, it may be only 1 member. So I'm just curious as to if there's a need for that we just cross that bridge when we come to it, leave it as is, and then when the commission established, and then it'll be determined based on the commission's terms of reference.
Administration.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. Through to Councillor Hawes. This was a request from the current Waste Management Authority, and is the request that's coming before all councils, the Hinton, Edson, Jasper, and Yellowhead County. And of course, if there's to keep the process moving from an authority to a commission, if that changes at any point in time, then it will come back before this council, and we will have your representation appointed as per those commission standards. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for that clarification. I appreciate that it's their request. So perfect.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. Council, we have a motion on the floor. Any questions or debates? Councillor Lambert.
No, everything.
Council, anything further? Seeing none, I'll call to question. All those in favor? Passed unanimously. Anything further for recommendations from administration? I just don't want to overlook any.
No, Mayor Mayos, I think we've captured everything. There were a couple that were rescinded, I think.
Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think this would be the time that I would like to move to add the Northern Rockies Museum to the agenda as a discussion item at our next committee of the whole. Now, I may have not said that like you wanted to hear it, but if I can get any help on making that motion, I would appreciate it.
Administration.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. Through to Councillor Race. If I could just clarify, you're looking for a discussion item to be added to a future committee of the whole for council to discuss and debate and perhaps set further direction on appointing a council member to that society board?
First off, I would like a discussion to see if council would approve it becoming a committee again. So that's what I'm looking for. It was a committee back in 2017, 2018, and then we took it off the organizational. So I want to see if council would like to see this come back as a committee. I would like to see it come back as a committee, because any organization or committee that we give $55,000, $60,000 to a year, I feel needs to have oversight, needs to have a counselor there when that much money is going to that group.
Administration.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. Through to Councillor Race. So there's a couple of things I'll comment on here. One is similar to the Golfing Society, the Museum Society, Ash Society. They are all standalone nonprofit organizations that have their own separate boards, bylaws, terms of reference that prescribe how their membership is made up. So what we would need to do, some of them have the ability, and I recall, again, several years ago, the museum group was one of those groups that actually took the initiative to change their bylaws to allow for municipal representation, a councillor specifically, both from Yellowhead County and the town of Hinton, and that it was therefore at the discretion of council to decide whether they wanted to appoint somebody to that or not. So assuming their bylaws have not changed and there's still that invitation on their membership in their bylaws to allow that. So that's, as an example, something that you would want to make sure it is okay to do first. You can't really appoint yourself to a board that doesn't allow you to sit on it. And so I know that also through the civic agencies process, as you alluded, there are certain groups that do receive regular funding from council on a regular basis. That could also be a platform to discuss whether that's a condition of receiving funds, is that these various groups allow for representation from council on that, and we would assist in that afterward. But the very first step for sure would be to get this on a future agenda for your discussion on the agenda, on your agenda. Thanks.
Okay, so may I continue, sir? So to say, I'd like to move to add the Northern Rockies Museum to a future committee of a whole to discuss.
If I may, and just in listening to CEO Howard, if there are other parts that we're unsure, would it be prudent to perhaps do the same motion we did for the Golf Society and get an analysis report, if that is the will of council tonight, in order to see if there's appetite to add a counselor to it? Would that be fair? Or what would be the recommendation from administration for what Councilor Race is intending?
Thank you. So I believe it aligns more closely with that example. It's not a new board that you're creating. There's already an existing, it's not our group, that kind of thing. So an analysis of that would do exactly that. We would confirm that their bylaw is allowed to do that, that they're open to doing that, all of those kinds of things. And then we would bring that back to council as a direction report to a future committee of the whole.
So could we use the same wording that Councillor McGowan used for his golfing? That would be great.
Let's pull that up for you, and you can perhaps draft something based on that one.
Councilor Race, would you be okay with that wording?
I would, but would I need to specify a date for this year or prior to the civic agency meetings?
That would be at your discretion if you'd like to put a date on it.
I'm looking at admin for a, I don't want to rush you on this report.
Yes, this, what month is it? It's October still. So my apologies. Could try to bring it for the, and I don't have a calendar quite handy, the second planning committee meeting in November. That's before, yeah, we put November, before the end of November 30th, and we could target that one. The other thing, if I may, while I have the floor, I'm just wanting to confirm that you're looking for a non-voting council member. Again, I believe, again, unless that group has changed their bylaws, which has been a few years, is your intent to be a non-voting member around that table?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
So is end of November suitable for you, Councilor Race?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, Council, we have a direction on the floor. Councilor Hawes.
Yeah, I'm a little, I guess, torn with this one because the previous motion in regards to the golfing society, there's been a request specifically sent by the golfing society to have that discussion. In this case, there hasn't been a request by the Northern Rockies Museum Board to add a counselor. And I guess this is where I somewhat struggle that we're inviting ourselves to another board. And so I really don't know, like we could task the administration to do that, but unless we know for certain that that board is even interested in having a council member, I feel like tasking administration with this task until we know that is kind of putting the cart before the horse, to be honest with you. So I'm not, I'd like to hear possibly from others, but I'm not sure if I am going to support this at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Hawes. For myself, I have no problem supporting this. My assumption, and this is where I'll kind of tag along with Councillor Hawes, is my assumption is administration would reach out to the committee and some information from, or not the committee, to the museum, and some information in the analysis report would indicate that, would be my expectation. Although I'm not familiar with analysis reports, but I was just assuming that some contact and insight from them would be part of this report. Is that the case, Ms. Howard?
Yes, this is again, a unique request. I assume the first thing we would do is pick up the phone and ask them if they're interested, and if they're not, it's a simple report. We bring it back and wouldn't not analyze anything further than that. So it's really, this is about extending an invitation. And that analysis report would be more robust if the invitation is accepted, or less robust if it's not. And if I could, I see Ms. Way as sort of the keeper of these relationships, and again, the civic agencies and whatnot. If there's anything you wanted to add to provide a more robust response, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO Howarth. Can everyone hear me? I changed my microphone.
Yep.
Perfect. Through to council. So with respect to this group, we already have some conversations ongoing with respect to the civic agency process that will come towards the end of November into the mid-December. And this was to form part of that report as one of the KPIs for a group such as this. The group over there is facing some change, as I alluded to earlier, so it's worthwhile for me to follow up with them again anyway. So I'm okay with this motion as is. It will likely come to you in a report as part of civic agency at that time. Thank you.
Administration, Councillor Hawes?
Yeah, knowing that information, I'm not going to be in support of this. Knowing that conversations are already happening and they are already going down this process of the, civic agency through that policy, and it would be brought to us. Because the other concern I have with it is this is not the only organization that we do provide funding to, and we're not part of them. And I'm worried that we open up that we're going to create even more committees. I think of the Hinton Bike Association, for example. We do fund them. We're not on any of those committees and things of that nature. So I'd personally be more interested in going through that civic agency policy, hearing what that analysis brings forward and that conversation from that group, and then make that decision at that time. So that's where I'm standing with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. I have Councillor Race and Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know what, that $15,000 or $7,000 that we give to the bike park people is a far cry from that $60,065 that we give to the museum. I love the museum, I truly do, but I think having a representative on that on the museum, we could maybe help them get volunteers. We could work with them and really assist them in becoming more than what they are today. And I'm not saying they're not great, because they are, but I would, we're giving that much money, there has to be some oversight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Councillor Taylor.
Oh, I'm just going to say that if I understood Heather Way's comment correctly, that was that she said that she I don't know if she used the word support, but she'd be okay with this direction because she was going to do the work anyways. So they're going to be doing some sort of discussions anyways with this. Should be bringing back information. They'll be part of a report coming anyway. So I don't see that this is extra or is going to cause any undue work for administration. That's what I heard her say. So I support it if that, and that's what I was told.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Council, anything further before I call this question? Councillor Stashik.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. I have a question for administration or any of the past Hinton Historical Society council members when there was a councillor on it. My question is, was that council position on that board a voting position previously or a non-voting position? And I may have a follow-up after.
Administration.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. Through to Councillor Ostashik. Digging back in my memory here, I believe when their bylaw changed, they actually had invited, again, both the town of Hinton and Yellowhead County to a member on the board, which is not just sort of again, that sort of fly on the wall or come join our meetings and you can listen to us. That non-voting part, I believe that they were given full voting quality around the table the way that other board members are. We could double check whether that's still the case or whether that's been since rescinded, but I also hear that Ms. Way is in the process of assessing things like that with a few of the groups we work with.
If I could follow up. Yeah, thank you for that clarification. That was my recollection as well, that it was a voting position previously. I understand the value and the thought behind having a counselor sitting on a board like that. Our civic agencies, the Hinton Historical Society is the one who gets the largest annual funding from the town. I think there likely is some value in having a council member sit on that board. In this situation, it would simply be to report back to council. I'm not sure that that's the kind of value I'm looking for. I think maybe if there is going to be a council member sitting on that board, that I would probably want it to be a voting member. So unfortunately, I'm not sure I can support the motion that's in front of us. If there's a way to get around the part about the non-voting and maybe leave that ambiguous until we get some additional information, maybe it is a voting member, maybe it's not. That can be discussed at some point in the future. But with it worded with the specific non-voting member, I won't be supporting the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik. Before I go to Councillor Race, I echo the same comment. I think many of us, or I'll speak for myself, I struggle with the non-voting part. To me, an analysis report could have a voting component and a non-voting component and have that information sort of shared. So I too would support this if it was amended to not be specific to non-voting and just have an analysis report that encompasses everything, and then we know, whether to pivot right or left. Councillor Race.
So, thank you, Mr. Mayor. In regards to our council procedural bylaw, I am now allowed to make the First Amendment to my motion. That's correct? So if I could see my motion. Okay, that council direct administration to bring could we just take out from of until
Just take out non-voting.
yeah, right up until Northern Rockies.
So if we can remove a non-voting,
Right, so if it were to say that council direct administration to bring an analysis report on the Northern Rockies Museum Board to a future committee.
my understanding was just removing non-voting, and actually
I
keep
don't know how
on.
it would sound though.
Should we see that like that, Ms. Brendel? Yeah. Because the purpose was to then
Yeah.
decipher whether we have a council member on the board. Councilor Race, your thoughts?
Okay, good.
You're good with that? Okay, council, we have a change to the motion. Councilor Stashik.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. Just a process question, since this is something new that we're amending our own motions now, does that take this form as you can just change it? Or is it an amendment that has to be voted on by council, same as if I was to make the amendment? So I would ask that of administration, I guess.
Administration.
Yes, the amendment still needs to be voted on, even though you can now make your own.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a amendment on the floor to remove non-voting from the main motion. So if we can only speak to that for the moment. Councilor Hawes?
Yeah, and only speaking to that, but my question is to administration on that, whether it's voting or non-voting, but the report potentially coming back or is coming back with the civic agency, would that not be determined through that analysis and that report and any recommendations that would come forward, whether it's voting, non-voting? That's my question to administration.
Administration.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. Through to Councillor Hawes. While a motion that you're considering here as mentioned, doesn't create additional work. It is duplication of information that you're going to get in context to everything else. And that's probably the most important piece here. Even when I listen to the debate about whether it's voting or non-voting, I mean, that's one piece of the whole context of the relationship that we have past, present, and future with this group, and how they align and fit in with the greater context of that whole program. Because, for example, even if they're a voting member, they're only one vote around the table, and it's a council vote. And then, like all other boards and committees, when you walk away from that vote, you have to support that vote, whether you voted against it or support it. And so there are, well, you could jump out of the pot into the fire kind of thing if without knowing the context of that. And so while we were going to deliver something like this anyway, I think the piece that might be missing if we bring it there separately, because it is a separate item, is that it will be done outside perhaps the scope of what you would want to consider trying to streamline that program and everybody that has that kind of relationship with us. And I don't know, Ms. Way, if I've captured that good enough.
Thank you, CEO Howard, through to council. So there are some relationships where voting membership would be acceptable. There are other instances where there are reasons why we cannot operate under those conditions, and where perhaps a non-voting would be more appropriate. And then, of course, there are instances where no membership is the best course of action. So to CO Howard's point, yes, this was going to be provided, and it was going to be balanced in that way as to why each of the items may or may not be possible for any particular group, with a recommendation as to how to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, administration. Councillor Hawes?
Yeah, I guess I'm, can I see the amendment again up there, just to?
At the moment is simply to remove non-voting.
Yeah, and that's where I'm struggling. I don't have enough info. I can't support it because I'm hearing what administration is saying, and that's where I'm concerned is you are just one vote. The board decides, and we might be advising or talking about it because there is a funding, but what if we vote against a certain funding, but you have to go with council? So that's where I guess I'm really not certain as to what the purpose or position will mean to both that organization, but also to our responsibility to council as well. So I can't support it. I don't have enough information right now to even one way or the other, to be honest with you. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. Council, we have an amendment on the floor to remove non-voting. Any further debate before I call the amendment? Question? Council, all those in favor of removing non-voting? Opposed? That is carried 6-1. We have the main motion now that does not have non-voting. Councillor Stashik.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. So speaking to the main motion now, there's been some concern raised about it might be some duplication of effort, some duplication of work. I'd maybe look to administration to ask if there's some alternate wording that could incorporate the intention of this motion with the work that administration's already doing. Maybe we could roll them together and not task administration with two separate things.
Administration?
Thank you, Mayor Michaels, through to Councillor Stashik. One extreme, the whole thing could be removed and council would, given the confidence from administration that we understand what you want, we know where you're going. That is what we were hoping to deliver to you. But if you wanted to have something in the queue to actually track that so it didn't get lost, then perhaps a connection to the, and sorry, Mr. Way, you might have to chime in to give me the name of that report you're bringing, or that agenda topic related to the civic agency report. I think you also, though, extended that it might become November or early December, so we may have to extend. You probably wouldn't even have to put a deadline on it, because the assumption is that it be included in the civic agency report that's coming from administration.
That is correct, CEO Howard. Thank you. So Ms. Rendell, if you can pop that current motion up on the screen for me, I can help out with an amendment. So towards the end of that, where it says before the end of November 2021, perhaps it could read that in conjunction with civic agency presentations and reports. Because for our incoming counselors, that is now an annual process, and you are jumping in at sort of the beginning and end point of every year, which is around our budget time, where council receives information on our current groups and any proposals for that going forward. Thank you.
Councillor Stashik?
Just one sec. If I may. Yeah, seeing the proposed amendment, I would like to make that amendment and then I'd speak to it if I can. I think this amendment achieves the intent of the original motion while allowing administration to be able to incorporate it into work that they're already doing and then present it to council at a time that makes sense, where we're already going to be discussing civic agencies and this can form part of the discussion. So I would like to make that amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik. Council, we have an amendment to the main motion. Councillor Taylor.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Perfect. Councillor Hawes.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Stashik, for this amendment. I too will be supporting this, which will also help me support the first motion as well. You know, I think if anything, it also shows administration there is a will of council to consider this, that it's coming forward, and that, you know, that report comes back. So I think working in conjunction is the best way to go. So I will support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. Council, we have an amendment on the floor. Any further debate? CEO Howard.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. I just want to clarify, we're adding some words, but there will still be a concern with, before the end of November. I believe that in conjunction with that is supposed to replace before the end of November 2021, but I could be misunderstanding that. Thank you.
Councillor Stashik.
Yeah, that was the intent. I believe that's what Ms. Way said, was to remove before the end of November 2021 and replace it with the amended words. So it would be future committee of the whole meeting in conjunction, or no, sorry. I guess we do have to take out committee of the whole meeting part 2 then, is that correct?
That would make it clean for sure. I mean, not obviously. The intent is that civic agency presentations and the admin reports may or may not come to a committee of the whole or regular. So if we're assisting here in your amendment, I would remove, can you highlight everything that's removed, maybe in a different color or italics, and remove, but we need to remove, thank you.
Okay. So everything after committee of the whole will be removed, and the additional verbiage that Councillor Stashik is putting forward would be replacing that. Perfect. Councillor Stashik.
Yeah, the wording of the amendment as presented there is correct.
Perfect. Okay, Council, we are dealing with the amendment portion to the main motion. Any further debate? Seeing none, I'll call to question the amendment in conjunction with the civic agency presentations and administrative reports, and remove to a future committee of the whole meeting before the end of November 2021. Council, all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried 6-1. Now we have an updated main motion that I'll give administration a moment to put together, and then we could. Correct. Is that correct, Councillor Stashing and Councillor Reese? Perfect. Council, we have the main motion on the floor. Anything further before I call this to question? Seeing none, I'll call to question the council direct administration to bring an analysis report of appointing a council representative on the Northern Rockies Museum Board in conjunction with the civic agency presentations and administrative reports. Council, all those in favor? That's passed unanimously. Council, any, Councillor Hawes?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make a motion, please. I'll talk slowly. I'd like to move to council direct administration to add to a future committee of a whole the discussion item Trails Committee. Trails Committee. Be considered added to the boards and committees of council. Of council, yeah. And if I could speak to it? Parks and Recreation, we've got a great master plan that's out there. I know administration has done. There's been a lot of discussion over our trail system. I think we're doing a good job upgrading it. It's the connectivity that I think, and this doesn't have to necessarily, I look at this committee potentially as something like the BIBO committee, where it's not something that's ongoing, but to bring both administration and council together, appointed council members potentially, you know, by the mayor, to discuss the future of our trails in our community, to look at, you know, 5-10 years from now, budgetary, what does it look like? So I'd like the council to, you know, consider having this discussion. Maybe it might not go anywhere, but I think it's something that we could entertain as a council, and then potentially make direction at that committee of the whole for, you know, terms of references or anything like that if decided upon. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. Council, we have a direction on the floor. Any questions or comments? Councillor Magoon?
I certainly am not against this particular item. I'm just looking for some efficiencies. We do have our strategic planning session coming up. I almost wonder if maybe we can cut out a little bit of time in that session to discuss any additional boards and committees that council might like to see formed, and then address that sort of in one go. Because my concern would be if we get too many or not enough, that might impact where council wants to go. And I would hate committing to a particular board or committee early.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Councillor Hawes?
Yeah, and I hear what you're saying, Councillor Magoon, and that's why I didn't want to really put a date to this at this time yet. I wanted to kind of leave it open at this point. I know we've got, you know, for sure strategic planning, and maybe that might be addressed during that, but I didn't want to put a date on it. I'd leave that to the prep committee, agenda prep committee, to kind of consider that when would be the best time to have that conversation. That was the intent of it. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. For myself, I'll be supporting this. I envision us starting to create more committees with a not a long-term mandate, but for a year or less than a year, in order to get a few counselors working on certain projects, in order to then bring council that information and us to vote and decide on things. That's the approach I'd like to take. And to me, I've heard for many years now that we have opportunities within our community to better our trails. And if we don't task it and work with administration to bring recommendations to amend the capital plan and to look at implementing things, then we leave it in the wheelhouse of administration to do. And to me, this is too important. I've heard it too often that it is something that the community would want, is to expand our trails, connect them from east to west. And I just don't see another way of doing this without tasking a few committee members working with council at some point. So to start the conversation, I'd love to have this at committee of the whole and then direct administration to then bring us a draft of what that looks like. But my previous term, we went quite a bit without seeing tangible changes in certain areas because of the lack of involvement of council. And then this, to me, would be an opportunity to do so. So I look forward to the initial conversation, if that is the will of council. Councilor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Right now, my mind could be changed. I cannot support this. When I think of committees that we truly need in our next few years is I envision a rec center committee. I envision a housing committee. These are priorities in our town. So right now, I will not support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Race. Council. Any further debate or questions? Councilor Haas.
And I hear Councilor, I agree with Councilor Race. There is other considerations coming forward. I do agree with Mayor Michaels, though, in regards to, tasking council to these projects, I think is vital to moving things forward, to being part of that discussion and bringing it back to council. And I agree, there may be other committees. I don't foresee this being an ongoing committee, as Mayor Michaels suggested, and I as well, that we get the ball rolling, started talking about it, bring it to council, and because we are going to be looking at capital budgets and things like that. And if we want and see a need for upgrading our trails, I have heard the connectivity is something that does need to be addressed from east to west in our community. And I think this is an opportunity to explore that those options potentially with both administration and council. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Haas. Council, anything further before I call this to question? Seeing none. A call to question that council direct administration to add a future committee of the whole meeting to the discussion item to consider adding trails committee to the boards and committees of council. Council, all those in favor? Opposed? It's carried 6-1. Council, anything further for this item tonight? Councilor Haas.
Yeah, thank you, council, for indulging. I do have one more, possibly two, one particular suggestion. And that's, I want to pretty much the same motion, Ms. Rendell, that council direct administration to add to a future committee of the whole, the discussion item to consider adding, and then I'll add what's different after that. And I'm going to look to administration for a little bit of clarity on the wording. I'm referring to the naming reserve list that we currently have. My intent is to bring a motion forward that a committee be established of council administration to look at that list. But I need the naming. What's the best term to use to capture that item?
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. Through to Councillor Hawes. I call upon Mr. Winston Rousseau, if he's still on. I know we brought this forward with a recent agenda item. I know we refer to it loosely as the naming committee.
Mm-hmm.
I don't, sort of back in the day, we had an actual naming committee, comprised differently of what we have recently. So it's linked to the bylaw and the policy that already exists that kind of prescribes how that happens. And so, sorry, I'm just talking through this. We may have to perhaps that can be part of your discussion, I guess, is it may just require bringing back that piece of whether it's a bylaw or policy or whatever, and amending it to actually create one, because I think right now it's already prescribed as to how that gets decided. I can invite Mr. Rousseau to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO Howard, and through to the chair to council. I think you've covered everything there, CAO, in terms of that it has to come back and that it has been prescribed, and there is an opportunity, as we said, with the former council to bring that back based on the list that is growing and the additional questions that were added during the former council's term. So I think it's prudent to bring it back to full council so that we can review this again and then have a robust discussion around that at a future council or a committee of the whole.
Thank you, administration. Councillor Hans?
Yeah, so some clarity then, I guess, I'd be interested in a little help in that motion to capture my intent. And my intent is if I may, Mayor Michaels, my intent is that council be part of this. I don't expect just administration to be part of this, but also council to have some ownership of it. And I'm not looking for once a month. I'm looking for twice a year potentially. Once every 6 months, that a group, a committee of council with administration take a look at that list and then review it, see what options that might be available. So that's my intent to discuss that. So if I'm looking to administration of what would capture that best to bring back to that discussion so we could have that conversation.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. Through to Councillor Hawes. Considering we understand what your intent is, I think you can just easily put in the naming committee.
Okay.
Again, whether that's to name whatever it is that we're naming, and then again, with any of these items, while they are placed on the agenda as a discussion item and there's no administrative report and there's nothing there, what I would commit at this point for any of those is at the very least, we would attach the bylaw that tells you how to create boards and committees and what kind of categories there are, advisory, all that sort of thing, for context of that. And if there is any other existing legislation, for example, a policy or a bylaw that already exists that may help form your debate and discussion about that, we would attach it as well. But again, we would just give that to you for information. Okay, thank you.
No, I appreciate that. So if I may speak quickly to it then, thank you, administration. I'm just looking for council's support on this. It's just the number of names have come forward in just the last number of months. And I think, and hearing that there is a list out there, and granted, administration, looks at that list, but has other duties, that this then, identifies a time and a place to have that conversation and look for council to move forward some of these with administration. So I hope to have your support in this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. Council, we have a direction on the floor. Any thoughts or comments? For myself, I could support this, and I like the premise, and I believe in the next, in our term, we should address this. It was a challenging experience last term, knowing that names come forward when something comes up, but there's nothing in the current policy that instigates the creativity part of taking an area in town that doesn't have a name and naming it. So if a street opens up, a developer creates a new subdivision and there's a street name needed, administration would then come to council. Awesome. But for the examples of the Chris Johnstone field, that would not come to council. Those would be one-offs. So if we have a committee that looks at the list of names and say, hey, where could we put this name to somewhere in the community, even though we don't have a street sign coming up? That to me has value. Now, my only question is, albeit important, it's maybe not the biggest priority in the first 6 months for council, but I think it's something we do have to address. If there was a date that it came before maybe the end of May of 2022, that it's on our tracking and we will deal with this at some point, I think there's a better chance of getting support of council. But the premise, I do believe strongly that we simply just won't have, we won't be filling these names that are on a list that's very long. Councillor Hawes.
So in that regards, I could, go with before quarter the beginning of quarter three of 2022 to have that brought to the committee of the whole, if that's, because I agree, this isn't something that we need to deal with right now, but this is the time to have this, get it on the books and, you know, and consider it for the future organizational meeting, if anything. So if I may, if I add before the end of quarter, or before the beginning of quarter three, or by the end of quarter two, whatever you prefer for wording.
Administration suggests June 30th, 2022.
Okay, if I would be amenable to that. Thank you.
Thank you, administration. Councillor Hawes. Councillor Magoon?
Yeah, I think this is exactly my concern that I expressed with the previous motion, is that I can't support this at this time. I think what we're really starting to do now is add things to the action pending list before we've had a strategic planning session. And for myself, that's not efficient. The best thing that this council can do is be cognizant that the horsepower in administration is limited. And if we just start adding things without identifying where it lines up in our hierarchy of needs, I have a concern with that. So I can't support that at this time. However, I would welcome that discussion very thoroughly in our strategic planning session.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Councillor Hawes?
Yeah, I guess I disagree. I think this is something that's ongoing, that's outside of our strategic plan. This is something of a community-based, almost promotion of our community, and really I'm not looking for, again, when brought to us, you know, again, not meeting on a regular basis. This is, if anything, once a year that we meet, and I think it's not necessarily on paper as our strategic plan, but this should be a strategic plan as a council, that we represent our community members and give them recognition, even if it's members that, you know, I know that some have passed and away, and we're recognizing them, and even current people of our community that we can recognize who are still with us. And I think it's you know, I think it's votes well for us as a council to consider those and take time to recognize those people. And I don't feel that that needs to be part of a strategic plan to do that. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. Council, we have a direction on the floor. Councillor Taylor, then Councillor Race.
Yeah, I echo Councillor Magoon's comments. Can't just keep putting stuff on administration without discussing strategically what we're doing. So I'll be voting against it.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will support this. This is 8 months down the road. Hopefully our 43 action items, we've prioritized them. We've gotten rid of 20 of them. I think this is important, and it's not like we're asking it to happen in November, December. So, but getting back to Councillor Magoon, this would not be a priority in the strategic planning discussions that I want to have. This is coming way down the road. So, but I will support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Councillor Magoon.
Yeah, and I guess where I disagree is the simple fact that there is already a naming policy involved with this. So the moment you start sending administration out to collect the information, they're going to have to bring this policy back. If we want to make changes to that, then admin and council are going to have to work through the existing policy and how that might potentially relate to a new board or a new committee of council. So it's not as simple as just having the discussion. You have to go back and look at the existing legislation and how that's going to be impacted by the potential creation of a new board. So again, yeah, having a discussion item, I fully agree. That's just one easy discussion in a committee of the whole, but it has ramifications down the road of adding to administration's plate before we have had to sit down, the courtesy of a sit down as council to say what's important to us. And that's time. It takes admin time, and that's limited.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Council, we have some back and forth. Councillor Stashik.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. Yeah, I'd weigh in quickly. I think I'm coming down on the side of Councillor Magoon's statements. I don't see any reason why this couldn't come forward at some point in the future after we've had our strategic plan discussions. There's no reason this couldn't form one of the initiatives that helps support say, community involvement or community engagement or something like that. If this council determines that that is something that they want to try and drive forward over the next 4 years, I don't see why this can't come back at that point as an initiative to help drive forward that strategic objective. So although I like the idea, I like the premise, and I do hope it comes back, I don't believe I'll support this particular motion, but I do look forward to talking about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik. Council, any further debate or questions before I call this to question? Seeing none. Call to question that council direct administration to add a future committee of the whole meeting before June 30th, 2022. The discussion item to consider adding naming committee to the boards and committees of council. Council, all those in favor?
Oh, sorry.
Opposed? That is defeated 4-3. Thank you, council. Good debate. Anything further for this action item this evening? Oh, Councilor LaBerge.
Well, this did have some wheels and then it just kind of died, so I'd like to make a motion to direct, oh, I gotta slow down. Direct administration to bring a discussion of council representations on boards. That council directs administration to bring a discussion of council representations on boards and committees. To a meeting of the whole prior to November 30th, 2021. Yeah. November 30th, 2021. And if I can speak to that, please. I heard it say that, you know, let's with the library board, let's get the information. We can change this in a couple of weeks. Let's have a look at it then. And I am concerned. I mean, the number of almost $38,000 overage in meeting fees is a big number. And I would like to have us have a look at this.
Thank you, Councilor LaBerge. Council, we have a direction on the floor. Any questions or debate? Councilor Stashik.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. I guess I would have a question for Councillor LaBerge since it's his motion. Is it restricted to the library board, or is this a conversation regarding all boards and committees?
Well,
And I guess I ask that because that's an information that administration would need to know to be able to prepare us for that discussion.
I was going to originally put the language in there relating to the library board because that's what we did discuss. But I thought if we're going to look at the library board, why wouldn't we look at all the boards and see if representation is appropriate?
Can I follow up? So my concern with that and the way that it's worded is that a lot of the council committees are governed by their terms of reference, and their terms of reference are, they define what the membership is made up of. So that the way it is would mean to me that we're going to do a review of the terms of reference for every single council committee, and that's not something I'd be able to support. If there's something in particular that there's a concern with, I could probably get behind that, but doing a full-scale review at this point, I don't think I could do that.
And that really wasn't my intention. It started with the discussion of the library board, and I just thought, let's look at the numbers as it relates. But my concern, my thought was directed toward the library board. So am I allowed to do, because can I amend this now? Administration? Okay. Where it says representation on boards and committees, why don't we just say representation on the Hinton Library Board? If that's the correct name of that committee. Yeah. Correct.
Councillor Barrage, if we captured that correctly?
Sure. Yes. Council, we have an amendment on the floor that would change the core of it to simply have the Hinton Library Board and remove boarding committees. So we'll discuss simply that amendment. Council, any questions or comments?
Support the amendment. It makes it a more manageable task.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Council, anyone else? Seeing none, I'll call to question the amendment on the Hinton Library Board, remove on board and committees. Council, all those in favor? That's passed unanimously. Now we have a combined. Council, any questions or comments? Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, again, for a long time, we just had one member on this board, and then an additional member was added in the latter part of 13 to 17 for a particular reason. I'm not sure that reason still exists for having two members. I think this is a worthwhile item.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Stashik.
Yeah, thank you. Previously, when this was brought forward for discussion, I didn't support it. However, this time I will. Reason being, this is different to me now because we have an opportunity now to get information brought to us on what the value is of having two members on that board. Maybe there is a value to it that I'm not seeing right now. This gives us the opportunity to get that information, to have a discussion, and then be able to make a more informed decision on it. So I will support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik. Council, anything further? Seeing none, I'll call to question that council direct administration to bring a discussion item on council representation on the Hinton Library Board to a committee meeting of the whole by November 30th, 2021. Council, all those in favor? That's passed unanimously. Council, anything further for our fifth item for this evening? Seeing none, thank you, administration. Thank you, council. That'll bring us to our sixth item. That was added, the code of conduct. Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, in our inaugural meeting, we had a review of the code of conduct, and if you look at the code of conduct bylaw itself, it says the bylaw must be brought forward for review at the beginning of each term. Maybe not necessarily, or at the, if council thinks it's appropriate, but I think it's appropriate. I have a number of concerns with the code of conduct, the way it exists, and so I would probably like to put a motion forward that I'd like to review it. I don't think now is an appropriate time. I'd need more information, but I'd like to postpone a review of this bylaw to a standing committee meeting prior to Christmas, because I think this is a significant bylaw that's worth looking at.
Is that a direction to administration?
It's a motion.
Okay. Ms. Randall.
the council direct administration to bring bylaw 1124 to a standing committee meeting for review prior to Christmas. Yeah, I think it is. Yep. I don't know how to say it. This bylaw is important to us. And it's important that we get it right. And I think it's just prudent for us to look at any concerns that people have with the clauses and the wording, and perhaps events that have happened, and how this bylaw can help us or be modified to help us. That's the best I could work it.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Magoon?
Yeah, thank you. No, I just want to extend my appreciation to Councillor Taylor. I look forward to supporting this.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. CEO Howard.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. Just want to confirm, we took a bit of latitude just to put a date in there. You only have one committee, the whole meeting in December now, which is the 14th. So that would be the last opportunity to bring it. And then the second thing, just for clarification for administration, are we bringing a discussion item and we're just putting the code of conduct on there for your discussion, or what is the report? What is the content of the report? What would our recommendation be? Like usually we do a whole, in this case, request for direction. We don't have any direction for you without you providing first direction to us. So I'm wanting to clarify if this is a discussion item and you just want the code of conduct attached to it for your discussion.
Councillor Taylor?
No, we're doing this first.
Councillor Magoon.
And I certainly don't want to preempt Councillor Taylor. It was his motion that came to the floor. I think for myself, if just a, in the item on the report, if there was just a simple copy of the code of conduct as it currently stands for council to discuss, I would be happy with that. That would meet my needs, but I don't know about the rest of my colleagues.
Councillor Taylor?
I would like to see the, I don't know how to word this, the provincial recommendations for what we should have in this and how our code of conduct varies from that, and be able to use that as a comparator to what we're doing. There must be some provincial template or provincial legislation that says this is what you have to have in a code of conduct. And I'd like to have that as a point of reference. Whether that's just a copy of that or whether that's our code of conduct with track changes in it, I'm not fussy.
Yeah, so administration, I see CEO Howard thinking.
Yes, sorry, forgive me, I'm just trying to work this out to try to clarify. Ms. Rendell, if I could get you to chime in on if there's something that we would attach with your code of conduct for your discussion. Again, we would not, wouldn't make any recommendations without the discussion and direction from a council to do that. So if we're trying to add all that into one motion right now, or whether you just want to bring your code of conduct back in front of you for a discussion about want any amendments to it and whatnot. So it's Randall, please.
Council, so there's not really like a provincially mandated conduct for municipalities, but what we could do prior to that is send it out for a legal review, and they will come back with recommendations on how to make ours better.
Yeah, I don't know that I was interested in that much effort. Is there not like a provincial guideline that says this is what should be in the code of conduct and here's what we recommend? If it's not a template, it's words?
Not really. I can like research on municipal affairs, seeing if they have like kind of a template that's a general template for municipalities to follow. But other than that, everybody kind of come up with a conduct bylaw and add things to that.
Okay, well, that's fine. If there's no template, that means that anything that we discuss is fair game for, inclusion or enhancement or reduction or whatever.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. CEO Howard?
There is, it is in the Municipal Government Act. So that would be a reference for council in their discussion as well. Again, I am still unclear whether you want a discussion item placed on an agenda for you to do, to have that discussion, or whether you're actually directing council to bring a report about something. As I'm still looking for clarity on that. Thank you.
So Councillor Taylor, we could have a discussion item that would be extremely preliminary, essentially a copy of the current bylaw, and then we can discuss, or would you like to direct administration to bring a report? And if so, what pertinent information would the report be focusing on? Is I guess the question.
Yeah, I don't want to make this more complicated than this. I think a preliminary discussion, and then a number of us can bring, any sort of concerns that we have and talk about some of those.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor.
I'm not thinking legal reviews. I'm just thinking just to get some of those concerns out there and preliminary talk about.
Councillor LaBerge.
Yeah, this has been a really significant issue, and I would like to see us have that discussion. Not only that, but the bylaw does say that at the beginning of the term, we would review it, so I will be supporting this.
Thank you, Councillor LaBerge. For myself, I will definitely support this. I would even go a step further. I don't want to convolute this evening, but I'm pretty convinced that we should put some serious time on this, which would mean a committee of council. I'd almost want to see a draft bylaw for terms of reference to have a committee overlook and bring recommendations to council for us to then change the current code of conduct. It's pretty much like we did with the procedural bylaw. I'm not, like I said, I'll support this. This is one extra step, but to me, the code of conduct should be reviewed thoroughly, and I'm ready to commit to a committee. So I'd rather almost see a draft just for consideration, but if there's no support for that, again, I would support this. Councillor Haas.
Yeah, and I too will support it. I think it definitely does have a need for a discussion, obviously, but I agree with Mayor Michaels that, even just a step forward, we did it with our procedure bylaw, and we came to a good conclusion of that with a couple of councillors and administration working on it. And I don't disagree with having the conversation as a whole, as a council, to bring forward some of those concerns, as Councillor Taylor mentioned. But I definitely would hope from that conversation that what Mayor Michaels was mentioning as a committee, potentially to work on it and bring a draft, would be the next step after that preliminary conversation. But again, that's yeah, I will support this, but I'm hoping it'll turn into that. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Councillor Magoon.
Yeah, actually, in this case, I don't think the one precludes the other. I think getting, and we could see tonight what the temperature is amongst council, to strike a working committee of council to move forward on addressing the code of conduct review, just like you had mentioned, in the same way we did procedural. And we can still maintain a discussion item for December the 14th. And that might actually be a good time to collect some of council's high-level feedback on the current code of conduct. So they may play off of one another quite neatly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Council, anything further? I guess one last question, to administration. There was an insinuation that we could have potentially two directions tonight, one being this, and then one potentially being directing administration to bring forward a draft terms of reference for a code of conduct committee review. Could both be doable?
Yes, doable. I'm not sure if one's a chicken egg in terms of you want to have this conversation first, or whether you want them to come at the same time or before the other. Definitely they're separate directions. And that's sort of my short answer to that one. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. With that, Councillor Stashik.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. I know it's not speaking directly to the motion that's before us, but I feel I would actually rather see that there's a direction for draft terms of reference for a code of conduct bylaw review committee come before this. I think the reason for that being, if there's a committee in place when we have this discussion, then we're actually presenting our thoughts to someone instead of just discussing it amongst ourselves and hoping that it gets captured and applied at some point in the future. So if there's actually a code of conduct bylaw review committee that we can have a discussion with, where the committee and administration can capture the thoughts of council, I feel that would expedite the process in coming up with a cleaner, more understandable, less unwieldy code of conduct bylaw that we can refer to in the future. So I don't necessarily not support this. I really do want to see, I would much rather see that bylaw review committee formed before this discussion happens. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik. Councillor Taylor.
Sure, I defer to your wisdom. Would you like me to withdraw that and say that we direct administration to develop a code of conduct bylaw committee?
I think that's the intent. I haven't heard from everyone on council, but that's that would be my preference also, and that's what I think I've heard.
I can withdraw that because that does to me the same thing. And if it's important enough, I think it's important enough to everybody to have a process that handles it. I'm good with that. You want me to, can I withdraw that?
So council, we have a motion to withdraw. Any objections? Seeing none, the motion is withdrawn. Now I will entertain a direction if that's the will of council. I have something along the lines of direct administration to bring forward a draft terms of reference for a code of conduct bylaw review committee to a future committee of the whole meeting prior to, if somebody would like to make that motion.
You just said it good.
Councillor Taylor.
You can't do it.
Oh, I'd like to say what you said. Which is what Albert said, so good on you. Albert will provide the words, or Marcel will.
Draft terms of reference for a code of conduct.
Okay, so we want to strengthen draft. So the committee has to be created by bylaws. You want to bring a draft bylaw creating a council.
Well, limited duration. Would this be a permanent thing?
Review committee. Yeah.
And then to create, well, the bylaw is going to be in the draft form and have to come to a regular if you want to choose, right? Or do you want to discuss the bylaw in terms of?
I think the intent previously we see that at standing or committee of the whole discuss what the context would be, and then we would bring it to regular for the 3 readings. Speaking on behalf of Councilor Taylor.
Thank you so much.
CAO Howard.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. The motion on the proposed here is a totally different volume and scale of work than the first one is to just put an item for your discussion. That is will not be accomplished by December 14th of this year, unless you want to change the year. We can push it out for sure into 2020. I realize that the other motion has been removed, as it felt like you almost had that conversation here instead of at the next meeting. So you've already decided that you want to explore going down this road. So that is a very different kind of work with what's going on right now in the organization and our budget process. that will be pushed out to the end of the first quarter.
So Councillor Taylor, would you be okay with before the end of the first quarter, which would be March 30th, 2022? Or what date would you like to add to this?
Yeah, I don't know what to say. I prefer this date, but I don't want it not to happen.
I can open up to council. Like,
Does anybody else have an opinion?
for me, that's only really 6 weeks away once we
Yeah,
get
we're at
into-
the end of the year.
It's up to council to prioritize. If we want to prioritize end of January, end of February, end of March, for me, we are going into budget season. I understand, and we have a long list of things. This is a priority. Administration, what would be the earliest from your perspective without, is the end of February achievable? Just to get some context, because this, in case there's some wiggle room, it sounds like council really wants to prioritize this. So what could be a date that may be slightly before the end of first quarter?
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. The budget schedule before you has your operating budget approved. Best case scenario is February 1st. After that's approved, there's still a lot of work afterwards to make that a live document. Again, without knowing the priorities of this council, without having reviewed all of your current action pending list, I appreciate the urgency and the importance, and I respect that. And while we can make it a priority, again, we're making a decision without it being in context to everything else. And so without saying, okay, we're not going to do these 3 things because this one thing is the most important right now, it's difficult for me to say, which is why I've proposed the March 31st, 2022.
Councillor McGoon?
Yeah, and I think for the same reasons I had to say earlier that I wanted to see where things sit in relation to the strat plan, I'd also have to say that here we do have a current and existing code of conduct bylaw. I think it does need a review. But that being said, I don't know where that stands in relation to the other goals of this council. So I think in pushing it out to that first quarter of 2022, it's not my favorite, but I may be unaware of what our other pressing priorities are. I won't know that till after our strat planning session. That is one of just those key dates for a council to establish. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McGoon. Councillor LaBerge?
Well, I like the direction this was going in because it was sounding like it was going to be quicker. And I mean, if by virtue of going to a committee, what you do is delay any action for 5 months, is I would like to see us have that discussion before the end of November. There may not be any appetite for change. I mean, I guess people could decide that it's perfect, but it's really important.
Thank you, Councillor LaBerge. Councillor Haas?
Yeah, I guess, when's the last time it actually was reviewed? Because I agree with, it needs to be addressed. I just pulling it up right now to see.
Mayor Michaels, if I may, it was 2018.
2018, so it was just recently, not long ago, looked at. And so I agree with Councillor LaBerge that I don't want to delay it. However, I think it is a priority, but we do have to have that discussion as a council of what those other priorities are. So I think it's reasonable. We do have, as Councillor McGoon said, a code of conduct in place. It may need to be revised and changed in some ways, but I think it's reasonable to bring that by that March date and have that serious conversation of a committee. I think we did it with our procedure bylaw and it needed reviewed. We've now identified that the code of conduct should be, and we go the right steps to get the committee and then have that discussion as what we'd like to see. So I think it's a reasonable date to March, seeing as how we do have one in place currently. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. For myself, I wouldn't mind even going back to the other direction after and supporting that conversation in December if we want to spend an hour talking about it. But my argument for those who may not support this direction is then that date of March of first quarter will be moved even further if we wait another, a month to have that conversation.
Although this could be a place.
So that's my challenge. I support this. I would support another motion, not this. I would support a different date for this. And then I could support a discussion of council at a committee level also. Councilor Taylor?
I didn't hear what you said. Did you say you supported the date of December 14th?
No, I do not.
Okay. Yeah, we could have another motion to discuss this earlier. In the meantime, we've got this committee getting formed for March 30th. I'm okay with that. So can I amend this to say, whatever you said? March 30th,
March 31st, 2022.
And if somebody else wants to put another motion for a discussion for maybe more immediate changes that we need on a prioritized basis or something, I don't.
And as we await, a question for CAO Howard. I'm just going back to when we created the Pine Beetle Committee. Do we need to pass a bylaw before having a committee to work, with the terms of reference in order to work on the current code of conduct? That's where I'm kind of pausing. I don't recall doing that in the past, and perhaps it could expedite time. My intent originally was to just get a committee formed to then take the code of conduct that we have and then work to bring amendments on it. And then the actual bylaw wouldn't be passed till much later. And to me, that task is much smaller. It's not creating a bylaw for first reading, second reading. It's about creating a group of people assigned to it with administration to work on what we currently have, and then bring those amendments to council to then have a updated bylaw. So I hope that makes sense what I'm saying, because now the sense of needing a lot of time to do a draft bylaw is somewhat confusing, because my original intent was not to have the draft bylaw ready for the 30th of March. It was the terms of reference for this working group to then start working on the code of conduct. Is there a misunderstanding between council and administration on that matter?
I'm going to give this a first kick, and then I will defer to Ms. Rendell. So you do have a governing document that tells you, that prescribes how you create boards and committees, and you need to follow that, or that needs to be amended first. And so and this is, and I apologize, this is the world we live in. So Ms. Rendell, is anything in addition to that you can support council on here?
So yes, we have an overarching boards and bylaw, but for this that you want to create, it would have to be listed in that overarching boards and committee bylaw. So you'd have to do amendment to that bylaw anyhow, or create a committee by bylaw on its own.
Thank you for that clarity. I just didn't want to do an extra step that we didn't need, so I appreciate that. Councilor McGoon.
Is there anything to prevent council from forming a working group? And do we have any current bylaws that legislate or legally define what that is?
I believe that is defined as one of the kinds of committees that you can create, and it's governed by that overarching bylaw. If I recall, and I don't have it in front of me right now, we can double check that for you as you.
If I may, will admin looks into that?
Yes.
Mr. Mayor? If that's not defined, then I would suggest that might be an alternative route, because I absolutely get the flavor of what's being thrown down. We as a council don't want to be bogged down by overburdening administration with the formats of creating boards and committees, when really what we're interested in right now is looking at the specific points within the existing code of conduct that maybe we don't feel fit the community, or aren't in line with the best practices elsewhere. And I think there's a lot of research that can be done by council themselves. That's at least what I'm hearing, without relying too heavily on admin. And if that's an option, simply to create, different terminology, a working group, I would throw that out as a potential solution.
Thank you, Councilor Magoon. Administration, any further comments?
We're still looking up that matter. Considering this was an agenda item that was added to the agenda this evening, and the administration understands that this is important to council. At this point, regardless of what's on the screen, and we can deal with that procedurally, your next, I would recommend that this discussion item that we have actually spent quite a bit of time doing the exercise that you were hoping to do in another meeting, to continue this robust conversation about what you want, what you think the solution is. We could get that quite easily as a discussion item for you on your November 23rd Committee of the Whole meeting, which is your second meeting of the month, where this would be an appropriate place to have that discussion. Also with that agenda, as you know, the second Committee of the Whole meeting of the month is where you also receive your council action pending list. So, and that will be discussed as part of the CAO's report. So you will have that in context. We are anticipating that your strategic plan work will be done early in the first quarter-ish of next year. As a date, of course, we haven't discussed that with you yet, so we haven't set a date for it. So that could put a placehold sooner than later for you to have continue this conversation so that you can continue to move on. And it would give more clear direction. I recognize that this is one solution that you have come to, but there may be other ones in addition to this or instead of this that is most likely come out of a more robust discussion topic of council. So in consideration of the time this evening, you will need an extension for your meeting in about 5 minutes. You have a couple other items to get through. That is the suggestion from my desk. Thank you.
Thank you, CO Howard. Council, what are we comfortable with? Councilor Reyes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would be comfortable going back to the first motion. Councillor Taylor has maybe 6 items on the code of conduct that he has concerns with, wants to discuss. And we've taken that to let's form a review committee. Maybe there's only 12 things in that whole document that are concerns to us. So I'd like to keep it real simple. Take a look at what the concerns are and go from there. But that's not up there. So.
Thank you, Councilor Reyes. Council? I still support the current direction. I think we can do both. I think that a committee needs to be formed for this because of the magnitude of it. I would love for, what we experienced last term with the dog review bylaw. The code of conduct to me is even more comprehensive. This is a complicated one. I don't want to just wing it at a council meeting. This has to be a committee of council with members who are focused on it, who are tasked on it with administration in order to deliver it. Like I said, I will still support a secondary motion after to discuss this at a committee of the whole to see if we omitted something, if we need to pivot. I would absolutely support, but I would like to give the marching orders today that we want a committee on it, and I'll support the amendment of March 31st. And like I said, I look forward to a secondary motion to add this to a discussion item in the very near future. Thank you. Councilor Stashik.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. Yeah, when I said that this was the direction that I was looking forward to this moving, I didn't anticipate that we were looking at a timeline that far out, just to have terms of reference for the committee come back to us so we could task a committee and create a bylaw and then send them to work. That said, I do still support this, because if we look back at last term and a couple of the major bylaws that council went through, there was the animal control bylaw, which I think to all accounts wasn't the smoothest of processes to go through.
But I contrast that with council procedure bylaw. Council procedure bylaw, there was a committee struck to review the bylaw, to take it, go back, revise, and what came out of that was a much stronger, much more comprehensive, much better bylaw that's clearer for everyone to understand. That's process that I support, that I would like to see applied here on the code of conduct bylaw. I think that would be the most beneficial way. That said, though, so I will support this. That said, though, I am reversing on what I said earlier, and I think that a discussion item is prudent to have, considering this isn't going to come back, until next year at the earliest, to even get the committee together to be able to go through that process. So some preliminary steps and a discussion, but in terms of this one, I will support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik. Council, we have an amendment on the floor. Any further debate? This will be to simply change the date, and then we'll deal with the main motion. Council, seeing no one else, I'll call the question to amend it to reflect March 31st, 2022. Council, all those in favor? Carried unanimously. Now we have the primary motion with the date of March 31st, 2022. Any further debate before I call this the question? Seeing none. I'll call to question that council direct administration to bring a draft bylaw to create a code of conduct review committee as a discussion item to the committee of the whole meeting before March 31st, 2022. Council, all those in favor? It's passed unanimously. Thank you very much, council. Council, any further direction? CEO Howard?
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. I just have a reply to your working committee. Lagoon. So in your bylaw 1070-4, a working committee is a specific advisory or task committee established by council to represent and engage the community to study, review, advance, and/or to make recommendations on a specific issue or matter of concern to the community relating to its mandate.
Follow up, Mr. Mayor? Sorry, and just so for clarification then, because it's identified as a committee, it has to be struck through bylaw?
That is correct. All of the, your overarching umbrella bylaw needs to list all of the committees of council.
Okay, thank you, administration, for doing that quickly. Thank you.
Councillor Hawes?
Mayor Michaels, I'd like to move to extend as we're coming up to our 4-hour mark.
Council, there's a direction on the floor to extend the meeting. Any debate? Seeing none, I'll call to question. All those in favor? Passed unanimously. Council, was there another direction we'd like to do with the code of conduct? Councillor Stashik?
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. I'm going to wing it a little bit, so I might need some help from administration. But I would like to direct administration to add a code of conduct bylaw. I guess I should wait, hey, sorry.
Give us a moment here. We'll share the screen and then we can work through it together. Thank you.
To bring a code of conduct bylaw discussion to the November 23rd, 2021 Committee of the Whole meeting. That's legislatively appropriate.
administration that is legislatively appropriate? Correct.
I think we
I could
have that,
speak.
and we've just added the word item, question item, and
Yep.
yes, that complies. Thank you.
Okay, if I could just speak to it quickly. Yeah, that gets us back to the original discussion with an accelerated timeline. So in a couple of weeks, we can have a preliminary discussion about it and lay some groundwork for that, hopefully the new committee that gets created in the spring. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik. Council, we have a motion on the floor. Any debate, questions? Seeing none, I'll call to question. All those in favor? That's passed unanimously. Council, anything further for this item this evening? Seeing none, thank you, administration and council. That'll bring us to our information item, Fortis Alberta franchise fee rider for 2022. CAO Howard.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. Through to council. Just a short info item here. I know that on October 12th, it brought information to you under some urgency around having to set the Fortis Alberta franchise fee rider for 2022. We have since then received a bit of an extension from Fortis Alberta that does not have to be completed on November 1st, but rather November 14th. It also provides us the opportunity to demonstrate that we have done the public notification for 2 full cycles. And so just to be sure that we are in compliance with the direction of council to bring it before November 1st. If that will not happen, we will instead be bringing it to your November 2nd meeting for your decision. And just as a heads up, to date, we have not received any public feedback, but that can still change. And we've attached the previous report for those of you who are new to the incoming council, so that you can do a little back reading on where you're at with that. This can be a difficult thing to understand and get through, and so I realize it's coming quickly to this council, so you can refer to that. And the other thing I will provide as a bit of a heads up coming next week is that the number of options that you had on October 12th are not the same number of options you're going to have next week, because once the direction is given and we have advertised for your intent to increase or decrease, each one of those changes requires an additional 2 weeks notice. So I just wanted to make you aware of that as well. And I do have Ms. Carta Fox as the co-author of this report, if you have any questions.
Thank you, CAO Howard. Council, Councillor Taylor.
I have a question and then I have some comments, because I've seen some of your comments on this, and I'd like you to hear my comments on it firsthand, if that's all right. But my question is, is it called FCM, the Federal Municipality of, you know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Or AUMA, have any guidelines for what to charge for these fees? Like, I think the federal municipality back when I was on council had some sort of guidelines as to what were reasonable to be charged. Beyond, does that exist, or are we just really got the AUC cap guidelines that we follow?
Administration.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. Through to Councillor Taylor. We do have the cap that we follow. I'm not aware of any other suggestions, guidelines, or regulations. I would like to invite Ms. Fox, though, in case there's anything that I'm missing on this matter. Thank you.
Ms. Fox.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. Yeah, as far as I'm aware, the only thing that guides us is the direction of council and how much money they want to bring to the town. The schedule provided had an attached rider report that shows what other municipalities charge. So you can look at that as a comparison. But other than that, there's no guidelines that say what the municipality is required to set, only the cap that it cannot exceed 20.
Thank you, Ms. Fox. Councillor Taylor.
Is it? I have some comments if anybody else has anything to say. Okay. Just be patient. Franchise fees are obscure tax. If anybody wanted to point out an obscure form of taxation that provided a tax increase way outside the bounds of the consumer price index, the franchise fee is it. It quietly slips money out of your bank account via your electrical and natural gas bills. Everybody talks about openness in government. We have a chance to do something about it. Specifically, council should reduce and eventually eliminate what may be called a fee on your power bill, but really is an obscure form of taxation in my mind. Not many people I know, I talk to, know much about this form of revenue collection and how municipalities use it. Theoretically, this item on your electrical and natural gas bill is a fee the power company pays in lieu of property tax, monopoly rights, and also land rent, since town streets have over 100 kilometers of pipe in them. It looks like a kind of franchise fee for the right to do business in Hinton. But the company doesn't really pay it, you do. It's one reason why our electrical and natural gas bills are so high. And since everyone needs power, it's not really an optional charge for something only some people choose to do, like a dog license or a swimming pool fee. In Hinton, we charge about, at least for the electrical portion, 2 to 3 times more in this than Edson, a town we compete with for business. In fact, looking at the information provided, about 70% of the towns in Alberta on that list charge less than we do for this fee. So we may be driving away business with this tax. Now, if we look what the history of this fee is in the town of Hinton, in 2019, this source of money for gas and electricity together generated approximately $471,000, or about 5.2% of our net municipal revenue for natural gas and electrical fees. 2019, the amount of money raised by this fee increased to about 1.67 million, or 12.7% of our net municipal taxes. 3 councils in a row have voted for large, and in some cases, very large increases in these fees. Check out the increases from 2018, 2018 to 19, 2013 to 14, and 11 to 12, because that was really large. And perhaps it helped them raise money while claiming to have held the line on property taxes, but it's not really working. These rising fees are one reason why taxpayers cringe when they look at the electrical or gas bills and the distribution and delivery charges. So they obscure the discussion without even the tactical advantage of keeping voters happy, let alone the strategic one of keeping the cost of living down. Sometimes you have to charge taxes. After all, the government has to be paid for, but this fee isn't an appropriate way of doing it for the following reasons. It's not very visible, it's poorly understood by the average taxpayer, and because it's not transparent, it doesn't receive the level of scrutiny or discussion that a property tax increase would receive, but it still annoys people. And it's not very accurate to call a tax a fee. If you want to return to transparent and accountable taxation, terms many candidates use during this election, then we have to decrease our reliance on this fee over time. It will take time because of our current heavy dependence on it as a revenue source. But I think we should start winding it down soon, and we should be open with the voters about why. So I'd be favoring options next week of revenue decreases over time, say a 10 to 15-year period of time, to try to get back to a transparent form of taxation. Just thought you should have my ideas on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Council. Councillor Stashik.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. I'd like to move the council accept the Fortis Alberta franchise fee rider for 2022 update report as information, and that the Fortis Alberta franchise fee rider for 2022 report with public notification feedback be brought to the November 2nd, 2021 regular meeting for decision.
Would you like to speak to that, Councillor Stashik?
No, I spoke to it during deliberation, and when it came before us, it's standing. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor Stashik. Council, we have a direction on the floor. Any further debate, comments, questions regarding this? My one question to administration, just to make sure and I guess everyone understand, this will then come to council on November 2nd with the 11.7% mark. If that number were to change, we would have to then re-advertise for another 2 weeks. Is that correct?
Thank you, Mayor Michaels, through to council. That is correct. Specific advertisements specifically stated that it was a decrease and what it was decreased from and to. So that would need to be restated for 2 more weeks and we would miss the extended deadline.
Thank you, CAO Howard. Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. But if option 2 was chosen, there would not need to be a notification period because it's status quo.
Administration.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels, through to Councillor Race. That is correct. You will basically have 2 options in front of you next week. One will be to maintain status quo, and that does not require notification to the community. The other one is to uphold the direction that was advertised, and that is to reduce it to 11.73. Thank you.
One more question. So should we go with option 2, the projected $110,000 that we would possibly make in revenue, it could be at council's discretion how we spend that 110. Is that correct?
Administration.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels, through to Councillor Race. That is a revenue source for the community. It helps offset whether it's other fees and charges, taxation, all of that. So yes, that is at the discretion of council. It's not tied to a particular kind of expense, the way some of our income is, grants, things like that. It goes into a general revenue and can be allocated against other areas in your budget. And Ms. Fox, if I have overstated that conviction, jump in here.
Thank you, Ms. Haworth. No, that's exactly right.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Thank you, administration. Council, anything further before we vote on this? Seeing none. Call to question that council accept the Fortis Alberta franchise fee rider for 2022 update report as information, and that the Fortis Alberta franchise fee rider for 2022 report with public notification feedback be brought to the November 2nd, 2021 regular meeting for decision. Council, all those in favor? That's passed unanimously. Council, anything further for this item this evening? And seeing none, thank you again, administration and council. That'll bring us to our reporting for this evening. And I will start on my right with Councillor Taylor.
Nothing to report.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Race.
Nothing to report, sir.
And Councillor LeBert.
Spending all my time reading.
Councillor LeBert. Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. I have nothing to report.
Thank you, Councillor Ostashik. Councillor McGoon.
Nothing to report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McGoon. Councillor Hawes.
Nothing at this time, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. And for myself, nothing to report. That'll bring us to our urgent matters. Council, are there any urgent matters? Seeing none, I'll go to the Chief Administrative Officer, Laura Howard.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels, through to council. I just have one quick item. Just we had an election last week, and I just wanted to speak to it briefly. Again, first of all, welcome everyone, and looking forward to the next 4 years and working together. So just a couple things. Some of it's been communicated to the community already. We did have 2,872 voters, which is a 13% increase in turnout. So excellent. Great citizen engagement for that. And we had the number of ballots that were opened was 11,488 ballots, which is great, great news. So overall, if there were any lessons learned from the election logistically this year, the town did receive very positive feedback with respect to all the voting days. The lines were short, the process was clearly explained, the COVID protocols left most people feeling safe, so that was really great. We did have a couple of complaints, concerns that we received, and they had to do with the ease of access, particularly in our advanced polling stations. And so that was rectified immediately, and we provided a direct phone number for people to connect with, and we actually came right out and helped them. So that adjustment was much appreciated and went well. Probably the biggest item, and for yourselves and for the community, is the amount allocated for the electronic ballot counters for the 2021 election. There was did not get budgeted and make it through the budget process, and so the costs for that could not be incurred this year for the election. Many communities, in fact, most communities have gone that direction now. The last number, and not official, was I think it's about $13,000 or $14,000 for us to acquire those. So what that means, of course, is that there's a bit of delay in addition to what maybe other communities would see. So that was definitely one learning. You will see that come forward in the budget process for the next election in 2025. The other thing is we did touch base with our regional sort of cohorts through the region here, Edson, Jasper, Yellowhead County, and we always connect with municipal affairs on the process and the protocols. Wherever there were discrepancies about what communities were doing differently, we did go default to the guiding legislation, as that is if there's any disputes about anything related to the election, that will be the governing legislation that supports and defends the town's position on those matters. And so the Hinton's election staff did conduct the election according to the Local Authorities Election Act, the Senate Election Act, and the referendum regulation. And so they're really quite proud of that. And we were not in a position, as a couple of communities were, that have had to face some of the challenges because that was not honored. The other thing, we did also have a small internet issue, and we went to publish the unofficial dates, or the unofficial count, so that resulted in another 20 to 30-minute delay. But we are looking forward to 2025, when we can look forward to those electronic ballot counters. We did have 20 people counting for, maybe that sounds like a lot or not enough, I'm not sure. But between the election workers and the town of Hinton staff, we had 20 people counting and recounting to make sure that our numbers were correct. And as one final piece of information, it is against legislation to report the ongoing counting of ballots as it's being done. If you see that being done in communities that have only one voting polling station, they are not in compliance with legislation. For the ones that you see doing that, it is likely because they have more than one polling station. So the bigger centers, and I'll use the biggest as in Edmonton and Calgary, they will report a polling station number long before the whole number for the community is rolled up. And it's because they can report per polling station, and Hinton only has one, so we cannot report the ongoing numbers. So I just wanted to, again, thank the community for coming out. Thank all of you for stepping up and running, and administration for their time with the election. And unless council has any other questions for administration and myself, that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, CEO Howard. Councillor Taylor?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the clarification. What about advanced polling? That applies to advanced polling. You can't count those and then report it. It has to wait too.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. Through to Councillor Taylor, that is correct. Okay. So, and I appreciate that question because that sometimes is considered. Had, for example, 3 advanced polling stations. Those still all get rolled into the one on the official day. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor McGoon?
So I'll ask, I hope it's not a difficult question for any of us. In previous elections, we reported live numbers. So did the legislation change between the last election and this one, or we just we didn't know that we weren't supposed to do that in the past?
Being new to this position and temporary and not involved in the elections before, I can't speak to that for sure. I'm not aware that the legislation has changed, but I know for sure that over time, legislation like that becomes much more prescriptive, and there are examples where there are lawsuits and that candidates have against municipalities because things were reported either inaccurately or in advance, and there were celebratory claims made and that had to be backed off. So like most legislation, over time, there becomes more case law that requires us to follow it more closely. But this year we followed everything to a T, and when it came to that, we got a 100% mark. Thank you.
If I could follow up, Mr. Mayor, I think the thing was that, and the only reason I bring it up is there was a big surprise for a lot of citizens. A lot of citizens settled in after work and sort of, collected themselves and their nearest and were like, we're going to watch the election results roll in. And
Who doesn't?
and I think there was just a bit of a surprise for some people in the community. So that's the only reason I asked. And now I know what to tell them moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Goon, and thank you, administration, for the clarity, especially on the voting stations, that we have one and then you have to report. I think I understood, or I just want to bring a bit more clarity. We can anticipate administration putting in a counting machine in one of the upcoming budgets. And I asked that because I've had many people said to put that on. So if there's a direction of council needed, then so be it. But is that the intent of that administration will have that within one of the draft budgets in coming years?
Thank you, Mayor Michael. Yes, 100% that you will see that recommendation. We do not require a direction from council, although I appreciate your support for that up front. So we will bring that forward with confidence. And typically the way it works, because it's the elections run every 4 years, we do transfer money into a reserve for the election in 4 years. In past years, I believe we put away $4,000 per year. So you will see an increase in the transfer to reserve every year for the next 4 years, so that we can both hire, make sure that we are fully staffed, that we have experienced staff, and that we can get the equipment that we need to run a successful election. Not that we should be talking about that already, but in 4 years, we just started off day one here. But yes, you will see that, and in the context of the other budget decisions you'll need to make. Thank you.
Thank you for that, CEO Howard. And for you, that covers reporting and status report?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. Any administrative inquiries tonight? None. I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Councillor Taylor.
I move we adjourn.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Council, all those in favor? That's passed unanimously. Thank you very much, everyone.
Good night.
Supposed to stay still.